session for 2016 budget session. City Manager Roloff, take it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. There's two numbers I want to share with the council because the library, in this case, gets a levy support, and then that's transferred into the library fund. And that number is, the increase is a little bit misleading. So I want to start out by saying the overall expenditures for the library department are proposed at $3.5 million, which is a 2.2% increase. You'll recall me saying that the overall general fund increase is 2.2%. So Jeff's department's increase is dead median in terms of everybody else. And so that, I think, needs to be said just at the outset. With that said, because of a variety of things that Jeff's going to talk about, the levy itself for the library is proposed to go up $175,000, which is 7%. But I wanted to point out the 2.2%, so you kept that in mind as Jeff made his presentation. But Jeff, I'd ask you to just kind of get into that revenue part, because that really is what leads into the expenditure part.
If you start with our budget section on page 237 of your budget book, what I would call your attention to is for 2013 and 14, under the current net surplus deficit, you'll see that in those 2 years we had a deficit, $77,932 and then $85,152. And then in 2015, if you slide your eye up the column for our year-end estimate under surplus applied, that's essentially the same situation, that we're going to be applying $137,800 in past years' accumulated surpluses in order to make the budget balanced in 2015. So the story there is that for the last 3 years, we've essentially been running a structural deficit, and that's because really all of our revenue numbers have been down over time. Specifically and most importantly, revenues from Winnebago County. We receive reimbursements for serving people outside of the city of Oshkosh who live in the townships where there are not libraries from the county. And that use over time has declined. It really accelerated that decline when we eliminated bookmobile service back in 2007. But along with other kind of general library circulation trends, our use from out in the county has declined over time. So that's part of that revenue picture from the county. The other piece of that is Winnebago County is fairly rare in Wisconsin, being only one of 2 counties in the state that support library capital projects. And back in '93, '94, when the Oshkosh Public Library had a major remodeling, the Winnebago County committed funding for 20 years to support that capital project. Well, in 2016, that sunsets. So it goes to zero. So really our revenue from Winnebago County has decreased by 1/3 in the 10 years that I've been serving as your library director. Now there are other less weighty revenue lines that have been going down. Our fines and fees have been decreasing, and that's largely because, partly because circulation is down, but also because we've gotten really good at reminding people when their books are about to come due, giving them opportunities to renew, and all of those things essentially reduce fines.
How much do those services cost you to operate? Like your text messaging alert, and then you have the email alerts. How much is that costing you to run those versus the decline in your fee income?
Those are actually services provided by the Winnefox Library System. So they're part of our participation fee in the shared automation project under Winnefox. So I can't itemize that out for you, but that's a major proportion of our contractual services expenditure line is that payment to Winnefox for our participation in the shared automation system.
But what you're doing is effective, because I returned my first book before the due date last week. First time ever happened in 20 years that I've lived here. So you didn't make a dime off of me.
I rely on those emails. And if you sign up for the text messaging alerts now, you can reply back to the alert with, I do it fairly recently now. You just reply back RA, which is renew all, and it sends it back and it just renews everything for you. So you can do it by text messaging as well. So again, those are convenience features, they're reminder features, they're customer service, but they gradually impact that revenue line. So when folks say, "Oh, I support the library through my fines," that's always been a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's less so than it used to be. Just for a point of reference, our payment to Winifox for our participation in that shared automation system for 2016 will be $151,656. So it's the vast majority of our contractual services expenditure line. So Mark, I appreciate Mark pointing out that our overall expenditures increase in the budget is right in line with the other departments, and the levy increase is up because the city, through Mark's leadership, is recognizing that the balance of support is shifting from the county and these other revenue sources over to the city in order to continue to maintain the level of quality of library services that residents of Oshkosh have come to expect. So that's kind of the big picture revenue versus expenditure line. Before we get on too far, I want to give a little bit of a quick plug too. If you look at our performance measures on page 238, I like to point to the results that we get in the annual city services survey, and that I combine the answers that people give to whether the library is very or somewhat important, and also those that evaluate our services as good or excellent. And when I combine those, the library services track very well to the very highest rated services in the city survey, and that's year after year. It's not a one-time thing, and that's really consistent with national surveys of continuing support within the populace of the importance of public libraries in people's lives. I want to just give you a real quick plug for next Wednesday night at Oshkosh Public Library. We're going to be having Wayne Wiegand, who's known as the Dean of Library Historians in the United States. He's written a new book called, it's being published by Oxford University Press. He's a graduate of UW Oshkosh, a native of Manitowoc. His book is called Part of Our Lives, A People's History of the American Public Library. And Wayne recently wrote an op-ed piece in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel talking about why people love their public libraries. And it boils down to three things: information, place, and reading. Those shouldn't surprise you. Those are consistent here in Oshkosh. People look to the library for unbiased information. They love the building. They love it as a place to be, as a community place. And we still, even though reading is changing, it's shifting from print to e, we're involved in both of those realms, and we're still supporting the reading activities of our populace. So next Wednesday, the 28th of October, 7 p.m. in our lower level meeting rooms, you can hear the kind of preeminent historian of the American Public Library speak right here in the town where he went to the university. So with that plug aside, I would ask if you have any questions about my operating budget.
What are, Jeff, roughly, what are the hours of operation, Monday through Friday, that's open from?
Monday through Thursday, we're open from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m.
Okay.
Friday, we're open from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. Saturday, we're open 9 to 5 during the school year. And Sunday, we're open 1 till 5 p.m. again, during the school year. During the summer, we cut back our hours so that on Saturday, we're only open till 1 p.m., and we're closed on Sundays during the summer, and that's between Memorial and Labor Day.
You said 1 to 5 on Sunday during the school?
1 to 5 on Sunday during the school year, and those are some of the busiest hours that we see. And even with decreasing visitors in the library, we still have foot traffic of between 1,000 and 1,100 people into our building every day. And I've said this before to you, but I don't think there's any other retail or other establishment in downtown Oshkosh that has that kind of daily foot traffic as the public library.
Who do you see, for the most part, who are your clients? Is it more of the school kid age? I wouldn't think it would be the college population, although I've seen them there studying versus their own library. And I've seen people, looking, that look like they may or may not, be trying to get online for jobs and things like that. But I mean, what are you noticing?
Well, we are noticing that the use of the public library by K-12 students is definitely changing from what it was 10, 20 years ago. They're not being assigned the kinds of research projects that require use of the public library anymore. So really, it is readers, people who are engaged with the world of ideas, people who want to learn something. So, it's the whole populace. I mean, I certainly, invite you to stop by on a Monday or a Tuesday afternoon, and you'll see a great cross-section of our community in the public library. But you're right, college students tend to concentrate their attention at Polk Library, or their college libraries, because those collections are geared towards their needs. So, it's really the families coming to use the children's library and reading to their kids, getting them involved in our children's programming. One of the things that we've done in recent years in shifting our programming focus is away from the idea that you bring your kid, you plunk them down, and somebody entertains them with a story, to engaging with parents as children's first teacher. We redesigned our early childhood storytime programs, created a program called High Hopes, which encourages families to engage in the birth to 3 years with the activities of play, sing, read, write, and talk. So we're really kind of shifting the focus to engaging families with the pre-literacy and then the literacy process. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think one of the things that I was, wondering is from a demographic standpoint, is there a number of seniors? Are you seeing more seniors at the library? Is it more kind of, that 25 to 55, or is it more children, that you're seeing as the majority of your clients? Do we need to do anything different to, I guess, cater to that populace, if you're seeing an increase in one particular demographic?
To tell you the truth, we generally don't do that kind of a deep dive demographic analysis of our use data. However, in the strategic plan that we're working on right now, that we hope to wrap up here before the end of the year, we have a major strategy to do demographic analysis and then use that data to do target marketing. So we will be examining, looking for the answers to those questions a lot more rigorously than we have done in the past. Any answer I give you now is going to be purely anecdotal.
Jeff, do you anticipate any retirements or anyone looking like they're going to be leaving, where you'll be either having to replace staff or anything like that?
We have a long-serving staff. I am estimating we could see 2 to 3 long-time employee retirements per year over the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay, or next 4 or 5 years, okay.
Right.
The challenge that presents for Jeff's fund, because it's the library fund, it's not just the department. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody was retiring in my department. Now, we've had enough retirements, and I've been teased enough, but my department, even as small as it is, a retirement payout comes from the general fund. So even if my budget goes over by the entire amount of the payout, it's absorbed in the general fund. with respect to any fund similarly funded like the library, funds are put into that fund, and then, even in accordance with state law, the library can use their discretion, the library board can use their discretion. But when they're out of money, they're out of money. There's no, it's not like the general fund where the general fund backfills it. Jeff has been using some of this reserve up to this point, not just for operations, but when he has a retirement payout, he's been able to use that. The reason that we wanted to keep that amount of money of the 46,000 in that ballpark wasn't just as some type of cushion or for discretionary things at Jeff's disposal. It's really for when those situations come up, because he knows, and Jeff has shared that with me, that he's got people coming up, not unlike what the fire department discussion was this morning, but unlike the fire department, even if the fire department went over, or my office, it's general funded. When Jeff's out of money, he's out of money.
I've got no general fund to dip into.
Right, so, or the fund goes into the negative, and then we'll have to backfill it anyway. That fund, that level of funding needs to stay there for those not unanticipated, but those things that are not necessarily budgeted for.
That deficit spending over the past few years has been used primarily for retirement payouts and for building maintenance issues that have come up. Steve, you had a question?
You have a lot of endowments and trusts and so forth. Where do those fit into your revenues?
They're not on these revenues at
Not at
all.
all. Okay.
No. Most of our trust funds are now held at the Oshkosh Area Community Fund. And so they aren't really part of this budget, and they're really not used operationally. The philosophy of the library board has always been that trust funds are to be used for expenditures for special projects, pilot projects, things that take us to a level of excellence above and beyond what the levy and our other basic revenue sources are able to do.
Thank you.
Could you just briefly, the grants and aids on the first page, what encompasses all that? You must be applying for grants, or is that, because the levy obviously is out there, but what's all under the grants and aids on page 237?
More aids than grants, right, Jeff?
Yes, there aren't any grants in that number
Okay.
there. I think that the grants and aids categories are essentially things.
Winnebago.
They're Winnebago
County.
County. We do get funding from other counties in addition to Winnebago County.
Okay.
And we get revenue from Winnefox Library System for several services that we provide to them. So, for example, I double as the director of the Winnefox Library System, and Winnefox pays a contractual fee to Oshkosh Public for my services as director.
Okay.
So there are several relationships like that. We also do all of the kind of back of the house maintenance of the shared book database that makes up our catalog. And we receive revenue from Winnefox for that as well. So those are the main categories. Winnebago, the counties, and Winnefox. Those are the big ones. We do apply for grants. We do on occasion receive grants. The kind of most reliable grant funding for public libraries is through the federal LSTA program, and that we had a grant through that program a year ago or so, but those aren't common.
And they're for kind of like specific things, right?
That was for some equipment, hardware and software to do some teen programming on digital creation, animation, graphic arts, some of those sorts of things. That was specific to that project. I want to thank Mark for his willingness to really dig into the library situation, to understand it, and to support this budget. We're hoping that for the first time in 4 years that, with your approval and support, that we'll be able to have a balanced budget in 2016. That's the major goal, is that we don't run this structural deficit any longer.
Good.
With that said, Jeff, are there any CIPs in the 2016?
We have no projects in the 2016. I double-checked this morning.
I wondered, we were double checking, we said, well, Jeff will know, because we didn't think there were any.
Nothing in the CIP this year.
Okay. I think that'll do it for library.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your service and for all the time that you're giving to this process. It's really appreciated.
Thanks.
On to the museum.
Museum is on page 243. Again, I think it's important to point out the differences because, and I'll just go in the opposite order from what I did the library, but I think the point's still valid. The levy itself is, excuse me, the levy itself is going up about $48,000, about 5.6%, but in reality, if you take a look at the numbers, it's only about $33,000, so very minimal increase in the museum budget per se, and I think as much of it has to do with insurance, people switching into insurance than anything in Brad's case. But I will just turn it over to Brad and let him discuss what's going on at the museum.
Well, the first thing I got to say is I really love having the budget reviews during the day, so for doing that, it's really wonderful. A lot of the changes that you see in our budget are related to personnel. It's either the insurance or it's changes, the normal changes in salary, that sort of thing. We had also a retirement of our longtime exhibit technician in the summer, so you have a payout there, and then also some staffing changes with building maintenance position. Other than that, the other line items are pretty minimal. We've been having a really good year at the museum this year. This is probably one of the best years we've had in a very, very long time, and we hope it signals a change for us. And much of what you see in the budget year after year for the museum is driven by attendance, and our revenue is driven by attendance. And this year's been really excellent, and I think we have a really good plan for next year as well. However, whenever we budget for that revenue, we always budget conservatively. So even though we've had a good year this year, we still budget conservatively for the coming year. Because in the past, we have had some issues with overestimating our attendance and overestimating our income, so we don't want to be put in that position again. Looking long-term, I think the key for the museum is that process that we're in right now of changing our exhibits over. I heard you in talking with Jeff about what is your target audience, who do you really shoot for? If you would ask that question to us, we really are very careful in targeting who we want to come to the museum, and our focus is really families, particularly people in their 20s, in their 30s and 40s that have young kids. That's really who we are focusing on right now. That's a conscious decision. We did that through strategic planning. We realized we really needed to build that base back up to the museum, and families with kids are the way to do that. We firmly believe that is the way to do that. And our exhibits reflect that philosophy, that is where we want to build it. That's not to say we don't have attendance from other demographics. We do, and we track it very carefully. I don't have that material with me, but we do, and it depends on, on exhibit and time of year, that sort of thing. But really, we're going for the 30 and 40-year-old families, people with kids.
Brad,
That being said, do you also track how many are from, like, the city of Oshkosh
We do.
versus outside?
Yeah, we do.
Roughly?
We track it by exhibition, and at any given time, and it's going to vary a little bit, like if you look at Art of the Brick, about 40% of those visitors came from Oshkosh proper. 60% came from someplace other than Oshkosh. Now, it could be far away. It could be Madison, Milwaukee, Stevens Point, that sort of thing, or it could be relatively close. It could be Appleton, Neenah, that sort of thing. I have those. Our marketing person actually tracks that. We ask every visitor for their zip code, and that's how we record that. So we have a pretty good picture of where those.
Do you believe with the transitioning over to the people of the waters that might bring more?
Actually, I think that is the key. I think all those long-term exhibits are the key to transitioning the museum in the short term and the long term. People of the Water being the start of what we anticipate to be a change in other exhibits as well. The new way of presenting history exhibits is no longer just focusing on history. It's a blend of history and science. That is the new wave. People of the Water blends history and science. It blends those two curriculum
And technology.
and technology, and it's very interactive. And so in many ways, we're on the cutting edge, and I think that that is the way that we will make the museum successful in many ways. And People of the Waters is pretty exciting for us. It's our first long-term exhibit. You know,
I just wanted to say, Brad, and Mark, I forgot to mention something to you, and I really should have sent you a note. Steve, and I had stopped by, and you gave us kind of a tour, of the library, and one of the things I was really proud about was that you had talked about when it came to kind of redoing and renovating the library there on the first floor, was that Brad had communication and input from the school district of how, what you were putting in there kind of relates to the curriculum that they need to have, and therefore would be, certainly marketable, I think, to other school districts, and I think certainly would be a way to bring revenue in. Sometimes you see something in which somebody really wants to stick with kind of what's always been versus, change. And I don't know, I just thought it was really cool, Brad, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. It really was a proud moment, and I didn't say anything at the time, but for somebody that's, part of historical and things from the past, it was kind of neat that you're embracing what needs to happen and including other community partners, to figure out how we can best serve them as well and not just ourselves.
well, thank you for that. I appreciate those kind words. When we did strategic planning, we really focused on what does it take to tie the museum to curriculum. We worked with a really fantastic focus group of teachers, and Stan Mack, the superintendent, was really helpful in that regard, in facilitating that and making that happen. And our target age group for kids is 4th grade. It's kind of the bread and butter group for the museum. It always has been, and it still will be. It's state history. It ties to Wisconsin Act 31, which is Native American. There's just a lot of things there that really cement museum and curriculum, and so we really felt it was important to get that feedback from those teachers. So.
I don't think there's really much with the operating budget. There are 3 small accounts that we need to go through, as well as CIP, Brad. If there are no other questions about the main operating budget, I'd suggest that we go to page 293, the museum membership fund. These aren't going to take a lot of time, but Brad can give you an idea. This is where donations and things of that nature, where they go.
Membership fund supports not only the normal things that we produce, like the newsletter, but membership fund has traditionally augmented the operating budget in terms of, say, for example, exhibitions. It's helped support the temporary LTE position, full-time position, that sort of thing. We've used the membership fund pretty heavily in the past. This year, we're cutting back on the membership fund. We're letting it rebuild. So we really pretty much have minimal expenditures in the membership fund for 2016.
And any of those transfers in, if they do occur, and the operating budget, when the transfers occur, you'll see them on page 243, but they start in these different funds. So that's the membership fund.
Just one question. Who's you mentioned the 4th graders and 30 and 40. Is this for most of your membership fund the older citizens?
No, actually, well,
Just
I would
curious.
say that the majority of it is, but what we're seeing is growth in the membership fund. We're seeing growth in the membership fund in 30 and 40-year-olds, and that's a really positive sign. So this past year, we've seen significant growth in the membership fund, and that's always a really good indicator of who you're reaching and what you're doing.
By being a member of the museum, what do you get for being a member of the?
The biggest advantage for people that they see is free admission. That's the #1 thing. But among the older people, they support the museum not because they want to come free, but more because they feel committed to the mission. That's the reason that they support it, that they want to make it successful.
And you have preview nights as well, correct?
Yeah, preview night,
Like
yeah.
Night Whispers is sold out, but if you're a member, you could
Right.
still get
No.
into some of these things.
Higher than that.
You'll have
There's
your
a
Christmas
benefit.
open house.
Yeah. Christmas open house is on the 22nd of November, but then that's part of what we call Deck the Halls, and during that period, which is through January 3rd, all adults are half price and all kids are free. That was really successful last year. It's our way of giving back to the community. And if you graph that out, we've seen a very noticeable increase in the years that we've had that. We expect that we will have a very good December.
One more PRPs, what's the cost to be a member?
TV, come on.
I know.
But yeah, looking at your membership numbers, it's I mean, from 2013 to 2014, a 25% increase in your membership is impressive, and I hope that that continues. And as one who's going to be having a little one here shortly, I'm sure that this is going to be something that I'm going to be passionate about with my child as well. So.
And Brad, are you doing any, like, packages with, like, the hotel at all, the downtown hotel, or any of the hotels in town where it's like a kind of like stay and, you
No,
know?
we have done that in the past. We're not currently doing anything. We tend to tie it to major exhibitions when we do that.
Partner with the Pain.
We do. We have a partnership program with the Pain in which we do a membership swap. And actually, other museums are included in that as well. So we include EAA in that, I believe the Historical Society, and the Military Veterans Museum.
Do you see, by those partnerships, do you see any increased flow, you think?
We see increase in attendance. We don't necessarily see increase in actual memberships taken out.
Okay. You know, I think I've been on council going on my 6th year now. I know you had, a year or two ago, I believe you had a fee increase. Is that on the radar at all?
For attendance?
Or the cost to come in, yeah.
We didn't.
Okay.
We discussed it, but we declined to do so, so it's been the same since 2004.
Oh, okay. It's been that long, all right.
If we could go back to page 243 with the significant accomplishments, and the second item, work cooperatively with community partners, that's just something Brad and I started to talk about at our strategic planning back in 2014, and we brought in with the library, the museum, the CVB, Landmarks Commission, who am I missing? Historical Society, to begin building a historic tourism program. I think it's the first time it's ever happened in the community. And you asked about, tours of the hotels. At some point, we'll start rolling in the hotels and so forth and start packaging these tours. But it's in the pilot program stage right now. Is that be correct?
It is, and that's one of the things I want to stress. The museum sees its collections as a community resource. And any way that we can use those collections to further community projects is what we really strive to do. So you saw it in, say, for example, in Hometown Stories, Wisconsin Public TV, Hometown
Oh, yeah,
Stories.
that's neat.
Now, with this pilot project with historic tourism, it's there as a resource, and I think it's an ideal way to use those collections. So I just see good things coming in the future from this kind of collaborative use of museum resources,
And you've worked with us on the historic signage for the riverfront.
right?
Doing
And
research,
my staff
design
also,
work.
the graphic part of my staff, my graphic artist, has been working with Media Services on their new logo. We're also working with the city on its logo and cleaning up the logo and its branding efforts and everything like that. So for us, staff, I can say that it's very rewarding for us to feel like we are an integrated part of the city team. So,
Modern
Individual
technology has,
The beauty of modern technology.
Individual memberships start at $30.
all right. Thank
It's very easy to find on the website.
Thank you.
you.
Museum collections, Brad?
Collections fund, we don't really have anything planned for an expenditure on those. However, I will tell you that there is a good chance that we may do something with People of the Waters using the collections fund. We don't really truly budget things for that. We do conservation work from that, we do restoration work, and we do some relatively small amount of acquisitions. But I think that that will change with People of the Water, because among the things that we're talking about for that exhibition is commissioning a painting, and that would be something that would come out of the collections fund.
Is that a fund people can donate to?
They can.
Okay.
And a good portion of that collection fund was created by a bequest of almost $300,000.
And then the last fund would be the Duro Trust Fund.
Bureau Trust, we are really, we have in the past used that for a variety of things. This year, we decided it's funding the curator position, the Duro curator position, but then we have not a lot of other things operationally that
We
we're
may not
funding
have it in the
that.
budget for you. Oh, okay. So, as I was struggling looking for it, excuse me.
I don't have it either.
Yeah. That somehow got missed in there, but
That's so large.
we do have it, and we do have it because, as I said, on page 243, there's a transfer in from Duro, so I'm sorry, Brad, but,
The one thing we can
We
get
owe that to
excited
you.
about.
yes, the one thing you were excited about, so I'm sorry, Brad.
Transferring a Duro in the operating budget is to support the curatorial position, the curator position, but the accumulated earnings in Duro, $200,000 of that will be part of the match for People of the Waters. That's the CIP thing. People of the Waters is really based on kind of a three-legged stool. The money from the council, the CIP money, if you would approve that money, the Duro money, and then the money that we're going to raise. So that is Duro part is People of the Waters.
Then you have what, the museum exhibition?
Exhibition fund?
Yeah.
The exhibition fund is the fund that supports the things like Be the Dinosaur, Art of the Brick. It's based on an annual solicitation of members and other supporters, augmented as well by grants. And it varies, but typically we're spending around $30,000, between $20,000 and $30,000 in any given year for exhibitions. It would not, the exhibition fund would not support something as large as People of the Waters. That's kind of its own separate project because it is so massive and so intense. So the exhibition fund is more like the annual expenditure, like Art of the Brick, one that's coming up, Be the Dinosaur, that sort of thing.
More traveling.
More traveling.
So if there are no more questions there, the CIP is where we want to go next. I would draw your attention to page 2016-36. It's in the public property improvements area. And Brad's mentioned it a number of times, People of the Waters is really the project that he was talking about.
It's a big project. We actually started with conceptual design in 2014 last year, so we had the conceptual design. Now we're into design development. We just started that in September. And then we will do implementation or the actual making it happen, probably late this year, early in 2017. And the proposed opening is in the spring of 2017.
So the donation, the status of the donations, Brad?
Well, the first part of it, like that we're in right now, is supported by about $50,000 in contributions. We haven't really started on the actual raising the last part of the leg of that stool, and we won't do that until we know the actual cost. And right now, that cost won't come until we're farther into design development, when we know specific costs for each and every component of it. And then we will be soliciting money to support each of those components.
That's the only CIP that Brad has in. There are, I don't believe any others in 2016. Anything else you can think of, Brad, in 2016?
No, that's the only one in 2016, and actually, it's probably just as well, because People of the Waters is a big and massive project, and with our staff, I'm not sure we could actually tackle another CIP project. We have, it's not to say we couldn't list a number of projects, but really, that's, People of the Waters is about all we can handle in any given year.
It's important to point out to the citizens, too, that the museum is not totally funded by tax dollars. You do a lot to raise money.
We do. It's the operational part is the income part of it. I know, doesn't that feel good? It's really stuffy in here. So it's the admission, and it's the store sales, and it's things like Night Whispers. But it's also the membership program, and it's also those grants and aids and gifts. We really couldn't function without those things.
Well, we are due to get Public Works in here, but actually, we asked them to stall a little bit. We owe the council the unclassified budget. We thought we would do that. Thank
you very much.
Thank you, Brad.
Although if Terry was smart, he would have wanted his budget considered right now, since you looked in the window and gave you some air. That gave me a charge, so that was really
You can
good.
put your coat on. You can put your coat on. I'm very warm over here, so I will appreciate that.
What page are you on, Mark?
I believe it's page 29, but let me...
You're correct.
I'm correct, all right. Page 29. But actually, it's probably best to go to page 30, because the details are there, and it really is the details. The unclassified are those areas that are, you can't necessarily put them into any one department, so we have them here. It's kind of a miscellaneous account. Unemployment compensation, that goes with the economy. We're a little under budget this year, which is okay. That's probably reflective of the economy. We have a number in there, and hope we never hit it, but other years we've really gotten clobbered with that. Uncollectible accounts is one that is primarily about ambulance. These are write-offs that we do. The revenues are up in ambulance, and whenever you have an up in revenue, you're going to have an offsetting increase in uncollectible accounts, because the more we charge, the more likelihood of, on a percentage basis, that some of those are going to fall through.
What are we doing to, and I know we have a firm with the ambulance that's kind of a bill collector thing. What are we trying to do to reduce that? I mean, that's just lost money.
Do we need a municipal?
Well, we'll get to that later, but, I mean, this is actually build out stuff, not court cases dismissed with citations, but this is actual money that, I know it's got to do with what, for, real estate taxes that, somebody went bankrupt or, can't pay and they don't have to pay. It's ambulance stuff, but is there a way that we can knock $100,000 off or something? I mean, just somehow, can we be more aggressive? Like property
You mean like give
taxes,
somebody an
if they don't,
incentive?
yeah, incentives to pay or something to get this down somehow. Can we do something? Or has other communities tried to do something that we could piggyback on that might work? I just think the amount keeps going up and up and up and up all the years I've been on council, and it seems like we just write them off and say, well, that's business.
I think a part of the problem is, though, is because it is ambulance. It's not like, it's not like any other retail service where you can be like, oh, you didn't pay your bill, so we're not going to send any,
Well, I understand
fire
that.
trucks or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's where the challenge lies, is that, this is one of those things that it's unlike anything else. And I think when you take a look at just in northeast Wisconsin, the number of bankruptcies and all that type of stuff, I mean, it keeps escalating every year. So I don't think I don't know, unless, there's something that they can do with the actual service, that we'd be willing to say, like, we'd take a 50% reduction or 30% reduction if they were able to pay it in full. I mean, I don't know if they're doing that now.
Which company we had been working with?
They are doing that now, to try to.
Yeah, and I
get them
know
to pay.
the water utility kind of does that, works with citizens, if they, can pay, whatever they can pay, we'll take it and that, but,
Even when we write them off as uncollectible, that doesn't mean we stop collecting. It just means that we just, from a bookkeeping
this is
standpoint, we need to write those off. The number has gone up. Part of it is the more you increase the rates, the more you're going to increase it's a percentage thing. The other part is, I think it's reflective of our community. People who cannot afford to pay, they end up becoming more likely to be uncollectible than others. The upside to that discussion is with ACA, more people will be covered, the likelihood of us collecting will be good. The write-offs will be different. They won't be written off here as uncollectible. They'll be more like Medicare, in which case we will accept what Medicare offers, we'll accept whatever the ACA covered plan offers, and that'll be the end of it. So it'll just be written off a different way. That's sort of the good and bad of ACA with respect to this. We'll probably get a better reliability of collection, but our collection percentage will be lower.
Well, and with water bills, they are assigned to the property, and we would collect them at the time the property is sold, correct?
We do better than that. We can collect it, water bills, we can collect it tax
Annually.
time. And that doesn't show up here. These are only general fund
Okay.
type of write-offs. Most of this is ambulance, and I think Tim could probably explain that, but Tim, or you follow that with Tim.
Well, there's going to be a time lag for this too. So the stuff that we're writing off now is not stuff that would have happened this year. Stuff that we're writing off is probably 3, 5,
7 years.
7 years. I remember a discussion in 2013 about switching the billing provider for the ambulance services. And I think this might still be part of that, where now some of the stuff that we're writing off now is from the last couple of years of that. So we might be seeing in 2017, 2018, a reduction in that because of the increased efficiencies out of the other billing service, if my memory is serving me correctly.
I didn't realize it was 7 years. If that is certainly the case, then what you said is even more valid than I would have thought. We had a firm out of Dallas that actually went out of business. They were very good, but change in management,
good.
and they just went downhill. Their collections just were awful. Then we went back to a local company, which has since been bought out by a larger national company, and I think the service has improved a great deal. So that's been taken care of. To the degree there are 7 years of write-off, well, you're taking yourself back to 2008, and you couldn't have picked the worst time to rely on collections in that part of the economy.
The city has wrote off all of the previous balances from the company that we worked with out of Texas. So those are no longer on our books. However, LifeQuest is continuing to attempt to collect that. The one thing that I worked on as part of the year-end audit was looking at our write-offs. And what I have is 15 to 20% of ambulance past due has a success rate of being collected. So we don't even start with a high percentage, unfortunately, and that's pretty standard within the industry. The one thing that we are trying to do within the city is trying to minimize the spikes, so when we have large write-offs, because they're hitting the 7-year mark, we're now trying to write off a set amount annually, so when we have a large write-off, we have accrued for that versus having to take the full write-off and spike this account depending on how our collections are going. I do anticipate that to impact and start to reduce our uncollectible accounts. But there are other items that are in this. Anybody that does file bankruptcy, would their debt or their money owed would be used in this account. The money for the refund or the rescissions of property taxes hit into this account. So the last 2 years have historically seen large entries for refunds and rescissions also in addition to the ambulance write-offs.
What is the amount that the agency keeps? So like if for every dollar, what do they keep?
And that varies, and it varies based on the age of the debt.
So if it's a newer debt, they keep less versus the more aged it gets, the larger amount they get to keep.
Was it 6%?
And that's
Right now,
negotiated with our contract that we have with the collection?
Yeah, that was,
Yes.
that was negotiated, and when you approved it, it had that in there.
100%.
You know, when you're talking about the old stuff, it's probably as high as 35%. I think it's somewhere in the range of 5 to 6% for fresh bills right out of the gate. But when we deem it delinquent, then we ratchet it up to 35%. The old Southwest Hospital Services billing program out of Dallas, we're in the 35, we've been in the 35% realm for a long time. I think we kick it up to the collections part, what, 6 months, 9 months, something like that?
Yeah, about there.
Yeah.
We will be bringing forward, that's a contract that renews annually, and so we will be bringing that forward again to council. The one item that LifeQuest has suggested that we also discuss with the council is a hardship policy, that might help in some of our collection efforts. So that will be something that you'll be hearing about in the next up and coming months when you get the contract renewal as well.
And with the hardship, then, you know, what are they, I guess, what are they proposing with the hardship?
That will offer different payment methods, and as well as it could potentially offer some clients the ability for the firm to write those off faster than what they are right now.
Okay. Because I would just think if there was something that we could implement or work with them to implement, you know, let's say, you know, versus paying 30 or 35%, and there was something that they could do and maybe, you know, take 15 instead.
Well, I think if we develop a hardship policy, that one you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The student loan industry has done a great job of formulating multiple plans, from income-based repayment to forbearance to interest caps. So that one, I think a policy like that would make sense to help offset some of this. So, I mean, if you can get 20 cents instead on the dollar instead of getting nothing, that's still a way to reduce the overall, and I think that will, the formulation of a hardship policy would be something that I could definitely see as a benefit to the city, with it, even though it's going to require some investment of staff time, so.
We'll look at those things as we're evaluating that proposal. The other items in there, there's employee benefit fees. That's for, as the employer, when we have the flexible spending plan, that's our fee that we pay them. Patriotic celebrations, 4th of July fireworks, and other costs that we incur related to the parade. Adjustment of salaries, we talked about this morning. The unclassified expenses, primarily the legal fees, and we talked about that yesterday as well. And then the mobile home tax, I continually forget about what that one is, so do you remember what it is?
We pay that to the other taxing jurisdictions for the mobile home payments that we receive.
Okay. So those are it. Industrial development is no longer here because that's in economic development now with GoEDC. So that's the unclassified account. Obviously, the collectibles or the uncollectible is part of that, but there's other items in there that we have. So if there aren't any other questions, I think we're ready for our next main event with Public Works. We're starting James in the Public Works Department a little earlier. Alan, we'll try to fit him in once we're all done. Obviously, Public Works CIP is massive, and I don't anticipate us getting into that today. But let's just see how it goes. But that'll primarily be November 4th. So, James, if you want to come on up, Steve, join us. And I assume you want to start with administration and engineering, James?
Yeah, that'll be a good spot. Kevin Ewan from Streets is on his way yet. I had Diane contact him, so we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. So if we can get started with some of the other things while we're waiting for Kevin, then we can roll right into those divisions once he gets here.
All righty. Public Works begins on page 117 with administration. Administration is actually proposed to be down slightly, primarily due to David Potek's retirement and changeover there. And so there's really not much in this budget because it pretty much is the director, the assistant director, the administrative assistant. So James, Steve, and Tracy is pretty much the department. Most of the other costs for the Public Works Department are shipped out to the division. This is pretty much administrative cost, auto allowance, training for pretty much James and Steve and Tracy. So I'm not sure. Any highlights, James, or let her ride?
I think you pretty much hit everything that there really is to hit in that one.
Engineering, that's why I told you to come up right away, Steve. There was no sense in you. Interestingly enough, Steve is in charge of the engineering division, but he's in Public Works Administration. But engineering is certainly the most diverse of the divisions in Public Works because it stretches across every single division. Engineering itself begins on page 121, and engineering is proposed to go up only 0.56%. And I think one of the things that I would point out, I'm going to let James and Steve just talk about what's going on in the division per se, but Charlie Carlson is due to come next Tuesday to discuss the wage study that he's going to be updating for us. One of the target areas is going to definitely be engineering because of the STEM type of jobs. Engineering jobs are certainly in demand, and that will impact budgets down the road. We are making no assumptions on those impacts with this budget. This is the base budget as it is today, and that may change as time goes on, but we wanted to make you aware of that. James, Steve, I'll let you guys take it from here with respect to engineering.
What do you want to know?
I think and James, we've had these conversations on the stormwater utility. The page that I like to focus on is page 122, which is our key performance measures for Public Works. The improved reliability of public infrastructure, the feet of sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and water main over 100 years. And I think this is one where if you want to talk about the challenges that the city's facing.
I think one of the big challenges that with infrastructures, and we have a lot of infrastructure and we have a lot of very old infrastructure. The city of Oshkosh is a relatively old community, if you will. It was established in the mid-1800s, so a lot of the infrastructure that we have in place, in fact some of the infrastructure that we are still utilizing dates into the 1800s. There are several sanitary sewers and storm sewers still in service today that were put in the ground in the 1880s, 1890s, and early 1900s. So it is a very significant ongoing challenge. One of the things that we do as a routine maintenance inspection, Streets Division does a lot of closed circuit televising inspection of the sanitary sewers and the storm sewers. So we're trying to get a better grasp on, even though a pipe may be 125, 130 years old, doesn't mean that it's falling apart and in dire need of work either. But when you start getting into that age, there are a lot of pipes that are in dire need of some kind of repair, replacement. There are various options for digging up a street just to replace a storm sewer or a sanitary sewer. There are some in-place methods that we've started utilizing in past years. Here probably about the last 4 or 5 years we've started doing some of the cured in-place sanitary sewer work, the linings. So it's a way to basically line a pipe, make it almost like a new pipe again without having to dig the street up. So it is a challenge. We do have a lot of very old infrastructure, but we're doing a lot of effort to get those things inspected, televised, to make sure we aren't having problems. And There are cases such as Mount Vernon Street, which got reconstructed this year. It wasn't on our radar for a reconstruct, but our routine televising and inspection showed that the pipe had completely disintegrated and there was no pipe left in some places. So it went from not even a project we were thinking about to, this has got to get done next year, or we could have critical backups in some of these homes. So, that's the challenge with the old infrastructure, but, that's how we're using the other divisions to help us get a better handle on them.
One of the things I would draw to council's attention and ask Steve to talk about, because this has been one of his main areas of emphasis, the very top goal and measure, something that was very important to the council, finalize special assessment certifications within 2 years of project completion. And right now, this time of year is the real crucial time to get them on this year's tax bill, is to get last year's project certified. And I can, during one of the breaks, Diane came in and gave me one of the projects to certify. I signed it so quickly, I didn't even look to see which one it was this time, but I just noticed it was 2014. But you'll notice that for 2014, percent certified by September 1 was 100%. So we are up to date on that. Steve, I'm not sure if you want to say much more about that, then we're getting it done.
Yeah, it's the backlog of a couple other ones that were older than that are also all out, with the exception of one property that's got a lawsuit pending. So,
Is that for the roundabout?
yes.
Yeah, the Taco Bell one, if you may recall that one, that we had to redo the hearing.
And I think one of the challenges too with that is when we have projects that are construction managed by the Department of Transportation, that is an extra challenge to our staff to try to get them certified in a timely manner, because we don't hold all the records. We're reliant on Wisconsin Department of Transportation to get us all the final as-built construction records so that we can certify the assessment. So there are projects that, are managed by the DOT that will take us a little bit longer just because of the time it takes us to get all the final records.
So that, I wanted to point that out because that was an area of emphasis that Steve was working on, that was part of his goals and objectives, and that has been caught up, and I know that was a huge issue. The special assessment fund isn't out of the woods because it's not just about getting those out, which was extremely important, but it's also, as we were increasing the number of projects we were doing, that increased just the collectibles. Our accounts receivable was going to grow, not whether we had a backlog or not, because we just did so many more projects than we did before. And that's why later on when we talk about the CIP, we're putting some money aside to borrow to replenish the special assessment fund, because it's not, now that we're caught up, it's not just about the collectibles, it's about volume now. I'm not sure if there's anything else with engineering per se. Really, engineering and CIP are so tightly bound that you're going to have the fun talking about the CIP project rather than the just the individuals that put it all together. With that, I'd suggest we get into Kevin. And does everybody know Bob's song? I want you to meet Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob. No.
Come on up, guys.
Bob is our new sanitation super manager. And, when I mentioned yesterday about offering up a position, Bob's first budget comes in and says, we are efficient. We're giving up a position. Not Cleaner or me with a red pen. That's all. It's just gave up his efficiency.
Didn't replace myself.
Well, the gutsiest person is one who's gutsy enough to say, hey, to even joke about that. But Bob offered that up. So I know we're going to do streets first, but I wanted you to meet Bob because we did, I think sometimes we neglect introducing some of our staff that works outside of City Hall. And I wanted you to meet Bob, not just because he's the new superintendent or the new manager over there, but also, he did a lot of work, his first budget, to get this done, and gave some other observations that I think were very useful when we get to that area. So thanks for coming, Bob.
Travis Hildebrandt, our new central garage manager, on his way.
Okay.
Well, so we, you know,
They
all these
scrambled.
guys up here, I had to bring them all along.
It was very helpful to have Travis and Bob here. Anyway, streets general is on page 125. The budget itself is proposed to go up a little over 3%. I think Kevin getting some of the details, but one of the things that, in terms of our pay system, last year I pointed out that we had, on the line item for equipment operators alone, we'd saved $100,000. That's because as people retire or transfer out of some of these equipment operator positions, they were getting replaced by somebody who was making as much as 42% less. Now when we achieve those savings and those people start working their way through the step system, they will be eligible for step increases. In fact, now Kevin's folks are more eligible for step increases than virtually anybody else in the city. So that 3%, you can't just say, well, gosh, why is he up 3%? Because he was down 100,000 on one line item 1 year. So you got to take the good with the bad. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's the bad. It's the timing of all this stuff just works out that way. But I think that's important to point out. With that said, equipment operators are another one of the positions that we're going to be evaluating with Charlie Carlson's update, because we know that recruitment has been a challenge for Kevin in filling positions. So with that, I'm just going to turn over to James and Kevin to talk about streets.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll just point out right away, it circulated around the room for everybody. Based on the conversation this morning, Mark, Diane had gotten a hold of me and asked me to put together some similar information to what Chief Groyle had presented to you during the police department budget workshop. So we kind of just took a real quick look at several of the divisions, all the divisions, if you will, that are housed out of field ops. Streets division, central garage, sanitation, and recycling. And, there you can see we just went back through the last 15 years worth of operating budgets and pulled out the actual number of funded positions in each of those divisions.
And I thought it was helpful to point that out when I saw how Chief Groyle had presented this information. You can see 2003, 2004 were some really rough times. That was when state aid, shared revenue was really getting cut significantly. And I know that some of the departments have come in and said, well, we've got great citizen satisfaction. And I think Public Works understands it and is certainly willing to own up to any concerns that are expressed by the public, but street repair and things like that, it's not just the streets division, that's a reflection of CIPs, number one. It is also a reflection somewhat of the streets division, but when you've lost 20% of your workforce over the last 10 years, some of it's efficiencies, and I wanted to give Bob and all his crews kudos for being so diligent about that, but streets has really taken a hit. And when we only, for example, I'm not sure how many routes we're currently running for snow, but I like to use that one because everybody understands it. What do we got, 26 routes still?
26, and it's not just the neighborhood routes that we have, but also parking lots and things like that we take care of, a lot of sidewalks. So we have, everybody's out and about. Nobody gets to take a break in the winter, that's for sure.
So even to fill all our routes, everybody has to be on board. That 29 does include support staff. That includes Kevin. That includes Todd and Andy, the two supervisors. So when you take the administrative staff, and supervisory staff is more appropriate, you're still down to like 24 people as opposed to the 29. So we have 26 routes.
24 operators.
24 operators. Something's got to give every time. And while some of the departments came in with very high marks, the public says we're not doing so great on streets, but it's also a function of staffing. It's not just certainly not through a lack of caring. And when Bob's got his crews out collecting garbage, they can't take a garbage holiday to go get rid of snow. Now, sometimes Kevin's, Andy's, and Todd's folks will switch over to help Bob because Bob has to collect the garbage. No questions asked. That's got to get done every day. But when it's snowing and it's garbage time, something's got to give, and usually snow plowing suffers. And if you don't agree with that, think about not getting your garbage picked up on a snowy day. It won't get found till spring. That's intolerable. So,
Well, and I think it's also worth pointing out, and Mark, you highlight this every time we talk about the citizen survey. The citizen survey is conducted in the wintertime. No matter how, you could have my road plowed in 10 minutes, but if I was getting out of my driveway at minute 5, then I'm going to say something on the citizen survey. So I think that's part of the information gathering process here is we have to be mindful of when the survey is conducted. So,
Well, I guess I'll take a comment. Mark, are you saying that you think we need to address employee status at the Public Works, or you think we have sufficient staffing in that area?
I'm giving you the bad news and then the good news. What I would say is the Public Works Department works very hard, and we have a brand-new facility, and we're going to get efficiencies, and what I'm asking is that we need time for those efficiencies to kick in. Kevin's been very open with me about some of the things they've done that they're already more efficient. And when it's necessary, it took a couple years, Bob's folks they've got it down now. They know how to manage. They're in sync now. We need to give streets time. Before I answer that question, Steve, and we did a little tweaking in the budget that I can show you, but I don't want to cut the number of bodies from the table of organization. I think it's premature, and I think these numbers bear it out. I will thank Chief Groyle for inspiring me this morning with this. So during the break, and I was late getting back, I was like, Diane, give James and Steve.
Yeah,
and
I'm
Kevin a
not
call."
saying we cut positions. I'm thinking of
adding.
adding is what I keep hearing. The efficiencies, the complaints I think most council members get, and I'll speak just for me, I don't get very many snowplow complaints. It's more of sidewalks not being shoveled and ice at bus stops or snow at bus stops type things. But it's more of, rough streets and our pothole patching program that we don't really have because it doesn't work. And those types of things that I think the complaints are. It isn't about the efficiency side or the side of that our sanitation isn't being taken care of. Those guys do a great job because, they just keep moving along, street after street after street, unless they have a breakdown with equipment. But I just, sounds like you're thinking we don't have enough staff in some areas.
I think when you take a look at the history, even with efficiencies from equipment, the wing plows we have are vastly better than anything we had years ago. I mean, but I certainly want to point out that when our citizen survey says we need to do a better job in those areas that you're highlighting, it's not an issue of they're not trying. They're doing it with 11 fewer people than we had 11 years ago. So they've lost an average of one person a year. Now, most of them were actually in 2005, 2006, but on average, they've lost one person a year, yet still plugging away every year in. So I do that kind of to lay the groundwork because as the building, as they get more efficient, I think we need to give latitude to the department to say if they think they have some needs. I think we need to be open-minded to those things. The discussion we had about the wheel tax, where we necessarily put that, we're not Appleton, we're different, and maybe some of those areas, if we want to consider it, I think this division and maintenance is as important as anything, and I think if there's any room for improvement, the return on your dollars is as effective in Public Works, if not more effective than any other investment. Now, I don't want to, I'm here, I am making this big speech, and I'm raking these guys over the coals. They're like, what did this guy turn into? Because I was challenging him with the building. And James, I'm just going to turn over to you, because we had this discussion. It was it was like, welcome, here's the job now.
And I think, one of the big things that we did talk about during, our preliminary meetings with the managers, yes, we've spent a lot on this field operations facility, and yes, we're seeing improvements, but we're not, we haven't had enough time in the facility to really be able to quantify what those things are. And some of the things where we will eventually start seeing some savings are not going to show up in the streets budget, they're going to show up in the central garage budget, because the maintenance of all of the vehicles is in central garage's budget, not in the streets division budget. So, there's, 20-some trucks that plow snow. Well, to maintain those trucks, that doesn't show up in the streets division, it shows up in central garage. To put fuel in those trucks doesn't show up in streets division, it shows up in central garage. So those are a lot of the things that, because of the way the vehicles are stored indoors now, we're starting to see some increased life, decreased maintenance on several of the vehicles over at the garage. But we just haven't had enough time to really document what that is.
You're looking at this portion of the budget is people, central garage is the stuff.
Right.
Right, and that's, that's one of the big challenges, I think, is, those two do tie together very closely, because you're right, the equipment and the maintenance of that equipment shows up in central garage, and, the streets part of it is a lot more the personnel. So that's where I think we're long-term going to start seeing some improvements, is in the maintenance costs of all of those vehicles. And those are some of the things that, Kevin and I have already talked about, how to, start keeping track of, the types of maintenance they had to do at the old facility, and, how many times, just replacing batteries just because a truck sits outside versus being stored inside. Storing a truck outside, when it's 20 below, there's a lot of times where the truck won't start, and it's because the battery is shot because it's been getting stored outside. By storing the vehicle inside, now all of a sudden we're starting to see those things last a little bit longer. But we don't have enough data, I guess, to really step forward and say, okay, here's where we're seeing it. Hopefully as the years go on and we're able to start building that, we're able to start presenting that a lot better for you.
Well, and as I look at this here, I look at the line item for personnel is 2.1. Your total budget is 2. I'm flipping between 125 and 129.
Okay, thank you.
So the 2016 portion of the budget is projected at 2.7.
Yep.
Just about 2.15 of that is just people.
Yes.
And then you add another approximately 300, that's salt. So now 2.5 out of 2.7 is people and salt.
And that gets to the point Kevin was making. The maintenance of all the vehicles over there, it shows up in a different budget fund.
So I could make a joke about being the salt of the earth or something here.
No.
Thanks, Kyle.
The other thing I think it's important for everybody to understand as well is, when you talk about efficiencies of, the streets staff, a lot of things that don't show up in the budget are things where we're doing work for other city departments. And that doesn't show up, and we do a lot of those types of things, whether it's parks, whether it's transit, a lot of things going on that aren't showing up and a lot of people aren't aware of, as well as, the people that we do have on the top end get more and more vacation every year, so we're not getting that full 2080 out of them. We're getting minus their vacation, minus their comp time, so the people aren't there all the time as well. So now even the new staff that's come on board has accumulated their vacation. So this year I think we had over another 650 hours of vacation time within the street department alone.
Well, and Ray yesterday was very quick to point out how much cooperation there has been between his department and yours.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of that, the streets division has the personnel with the skills and knowledge to do a lot of maintenance activities to help out other departments. Like Kevin pointed out, and like you said, Parks Director Maurer pointed out yesterday, if they need help with something, they'll call up our staff and say, hey, we're having some issues. A prime one that comes to mind just earlier this summer was the area in South Park around the big shelter where the Wednesday afternoon farmers market was taking place. That pavement was in very poor condition, and they actually did have some trip accidents and injuries from patrons visiting the farmers market because of the situation and the condition of that pavement. Ray and I were out there one day, looking at it, and I think Ray got a hold of you, Kevin, and, by the time the farmers market was back the next week, Kevin had gotten his staff out there and corrected that situation for him. So there's a lot of that cooperation and sharing across to get our facilities as safe as we can.
With that, the staffing is proposed to be stable, but I'll draw your attention to page 129. We have a negative line item in the streets budget for salary savings, as there are vacancies with equipment operators. The idea is that we aren't necessarily immediately filling them. Kevin will utilize his discretion on when he needs to fill those, and we will realize some savings from that. Middle of the winter, we want to be fully staffed. Middle of the summer, maybe it's a little more discretionary. But we're going to give Kevin some leeway to really evaluate what's going on. So that, I just wanted to just translate how the overall issue that they're looking at from a management standpoint is getting translated in here. So a negative $29,000 is in his budget. It's equivalent to about one half a position, and that's what we just equated it to. The other thing I want to point out, because I'm responsible for it, not Kevin, the large part of their materials budget is sodium chloride salt. Just the thing I want our salt sheds to be filled before the season starts, and I authorize Kevin to exceed his line item for $323,000, so that when we have as much salt as we can possibly have. It's not that we can't get the salt, but I've seen experiences in the past when even when we have a reserve order, if they don't have salt, they don't have salt. In the winter of '09, the salt just wasn't available at the ports. It didn't get delivered, and we were shorthanded. I don't want to be shorthanded, so I want to start. It's a good old-fashioned inventory management. My first supervisory job in local government was actually running a warehouse. There's a max order and a min order and and a capacity, and we're going max. Kevin's heard the story before. He's tired of it. But Kevin, the salt shed's going to be filled, right?
Correct.
All right, you heard it on TV.
So much for just in time?
Will it be filled?
Not for, so much for just in time. Oh,
It's out the window, okay.
not with salt. Salt is not a just-in-time delivery thing.
When will it be filled?
Well, we're real close to getting the new dome completed. The last step is to pour the concrete in front of the entranceway, which they have done, and that needs about a 7-day cure time. And our plan is, once they give us the okay, we're going to take our delivery, but we do have some salt over in our leased sheds over on Osborne already. And our plan is to, as the snow comes and we start getting out, we'll use that material first, and at the end of the day, end of the night, whatever's left on those trucks, we'll just bring back to the new dome. And, that way we're not the extra expense of just saying, okay, our dome's ready, we're going to go and truck it all over to the new dome. So, but between the old shed and the new dome, we'll have capacity.
I was going to ask, the reason being is because I just drove from here to Pittsburgh and back, and what was interesting is I noticed in Pennsylvania, all of theirs, because their highway department, and where they store is like right off of, I forget what it is, 79 or whatever, and they're all full. You go through Indiana, they're all empty. So I'm like, I wonder what our status is.
It's all a strategy. I like to have it full, but there's a transition issue here, but Kevin knows that. You'll see that the number is still up $40,000. The cost per ton, Kevin, what did it go up this year? It went up again, right?
Slightly. We're at about $65 a ton right now.
So, I mean, and there used to be a bargain rate if you ordered early. There's no bargain rate for ordering early anymore. It used to be as simple as you used to be able to get it for $40 a ton early and $60 a ton later, encouraging you to order early. Now it's $65 a ton for everything. The cost has really gone up, but that's one of those areas where I just absolutely do not want to take any chances. So I authorize them to exceed that line item, and it's in our best interest, I believe, to do that.
And
I
did
do
you?
have, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I do have one question. I'm sure we've all been asked this question. Why the shape of the dome? Why the shape?
Well,
Yurt.
one of the main reasons we went,
Yeah, it looks like a yurt.
one of the main reasons we went with that type of facility is space.
Hey,
You know, we got
this
such
is
a
much
tight,
salt.
tight area to work with, and that fit our site that we had. And for the amount that we take, it's the best design versus some of the, what you'd call a shed or a barn that you've seen around Wisconsin. But these types of structures are all over the country, northern tier states.
Salt
Are
piles.
we renting space at Winnebago County right now for our salt storage?
We lease the space
Lease.
from them, $500 per shed per year.
There
So,
will be some savings by
yeah,
having.
little bit.
We're keeping it right now because we
Right,
didn't want to
right.
truck it twice. It's people and salt and
of the
that's
earth.
about it in this budget, because Central Garage has a lot of other things.
So Mark, and I can't remember how long ago this was, we had the discussion about, do we have a policy as far as like, and it was something with pavement, and it was,
We do not have a bare pavement policy.
yeah. So,
Kevin, you want to tackle that one? We do not have a bare pavement policy. People think we have a poor bare pavement policy. We've never had a bare pavement policy.
because I just was wondering, how does that then impact this budget if we were to do anything before the end of the year? Is that something that we're planning on talking about 2016 to implement 2017, if that's a direction we want to go?
If we were going to be talking about bare pavement, we would have to be talking about supplementing this budget significantly, and that's the wheel tax discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be significant staff and
Equipment.
salt and equipment costs to implement, a bare pavement throughout the city. I don't know if you want to talk
Well,
about like
you
your
have to
materials.
right now, our bare pavement policy applies to all the main streets, if you want to call it that, and the arterials as well as hills, intersections, things like that. And so if you can imagine stretching that out to every inch of every street in town, you're going to at least,
And I don't think we could do that, but, the feedback that we get, and again, it's a lot of times in winter, is that you would think like a intersection like Jackson and Murdoch, or Wisconsin and Murdoch, or, going into the roundabouts, although I didn't agree with that last year. They were saying that, there was still too much ice going in, but I would agree on the north side of town, there were many, many times in a number of the intersections, there was still quite a bit of ice. On the flip side of that, too, it's also recognizing, I don't think the weather was conducive either, so the minute it melts from the salt, it refreezes. So, I don't know that that's because of lack of effort or lack of attention on staff's part, or if it was just more a climate issue.
it's more of a
that time.
climate issue, like you said. It's a battle, between the getting it melted and then temperature drops, and you have to get back there and try and hit it again, which we do. And there's also times, depending on the weather, depending on the storm, is it a heavy wet snow, is it a light dry snow? There's so many things that go into it, and we treat each storm individually. But there's times where we actually we'll salt mid-block. And again, when you put some salt down mid-block, the traffic will carry it towards the intersections. And so that is something we do on occasion as well.
That's a question that came up too. They're like, they drop salt, like, whatever. Why'd they do that? that would be a good response.
And I think another big,
Carl will spread it
a big thing to keep in
You're doing
mind
work
is,
for us.
the effective temperature range of sodium chloride, is, you can only get to a certain temperature and the stuff just doesn't work anymore. There are other compounds that do work at colder temperatures, but they're much more expensive. So it's kind of a trade-off. The sodium chloride is the most available. It's, I think the, least expensive of the the compounds you can put down. But, as the temperature gets colder, it's the first one to stop working as well. And that's where the pavement temperature sensors on the supervisors' trucks, they're always monitoring that and making sure that, we're not putting salt down when it's not going to do any good. Because if it's too cold to, for it to do any good, why are you putting it down? Because it's useless. That's one of the things that they're very conscientious of, making sure that when they're putting it down on the pavement, it's going to work.
If there's nothing with streets, I'd suggest we move on to central garage, which Kevin referenced a little bit already.
Come on up, Travis.
Introduce you to Travis Hildebrandt. He's our new central garage mechanics manager.
Hi there.
And
Welcome to the table.
Thank you. Central garage is actually going down by approximately $72,000, or about 3.5%. This is where most of our fuel's purchased. We've taken our best educated guess at what that's going to be for next year, and we've reduced that line item in several accounts, and that is a large part of the decrease. Supplies and repair parts actually are up a little bit with historical, and I'll let those guys talk about it. But Kevin or Travis, just want to talk a little bit about the garage.
Have at it.
Okay, obviously, the new facility, as we've discussed, has really, made a difference in a lot of things, as far as, being able to get the equipment in and out on a more timely basis. We're not shuffling, we had a one-way and we're backing in, we're, trying to, I think everybody remembers that. But the main things in this budget, I think, that we have to look at, of course, equipment repair. You get into a lot of different scenarios whereby the numbers change and can change rather quickly if you have a major repair that needs to take place. The other things that, some of the things this year actually that are, increasing some of these numbers had to do with our chipper that we use in our yard waste drop-off site. We've had numerous problems with that piece of equipment, and those repairs, they show up in here, but we've been reimbursed through insurance, which doesn't show here. That that's something that again, I just wanted to point out to make sure everybody understood that.
I think, like Mark pointed out, one of the biggest line items in the central garage budget is the fuel for all city vehicles. It's not just the streets division vehicle, it's all city vehicles are fueled at the central garage facility, and all of that fuel is accounted for in only the central garage budget. If you look at the line items, diesel fuel, compressed natural gas, and gasoline, we're looking at some very significant decreases. I think that's primarily, anybody's guess is as good as the next person's as far as what fuel prices are going to do, in the next year. But, I think, we've seen a significant decrease in fuel prices in the last year to year and a half, and we haven't been seeing them fluctuate up and down real rapidly. And so I think, that's one of the reasons why you're seeing, I think, about $130,000 decrease in overall fuel between diesel, gas, and up a little bit on compressed natural gas as we get more vehicles online that operate on CNG.
And it's actually a little bit more than that as far as the decrease that you see there, except for the compressed natural gas, and that's the one that hasn't fluctuated in price. It hasn't come down like the other ones for whatever reason. And, we run into a little bit of an issue, I guess. I mean, Quick Trip's great. We work with them, but we're kind of at their mercy, so to speak, because they're the supplier of CNG for our vehicles at this point. So,
I hate to be a cynic, but it's a federal election year. I suspect that fuel prices will stabilize or drop accordingly.
There are many factors that went into our estimating.
Historically, though, you are right. That does seem to be the trend.
yes.
And as this goes forward, this is where we're going to start to see some of the maintenance issues of our investment in the central garage. This is where those will start to appear in the next couple of years as we realize the savings from storing vehicles indoors and less maintenance on hoses and connectors. I know we had that conversation at the opening of the facility. Instead of having to replace every hose on every truck every year.
And I think one of the other things to, Travis's credit and the mechanics that he's got there now, there's been a shift a little bit into, some of the philosophy of the mechanics, and they're spending, I think, a little bit more time on the diagnosis to narrow down, I think it used to be, okay, the diagnosis says the problem is here, so we'll replace all of these parts and the problem will be solved. Well, now they're spending a little bit more time on that diagnosis, and maybe instead of having to replace, this much stuff, you get down to maybe the one or two pieces that actually need to be replaced. And I think, that's one of the things with the facility that we have now, being able to have enough space to be able to take that extra time to narrow the diagnosis down to the exact cause, and not, okay, I got 5 more trucks that got to be done. I know it's something in here, so just replace it all, get this truck out and get the next one in. They've got the space now to be able to take the time to narrow those diagnoses down and just replace the parts that need to be replaced.
I would equate it to all the discussion we've had about wellness, and wellness is so important, that proactive stuff. In some cases, it was like, let's get this fixed because it needs to get on the road, and we'll worry about anything else later. And either things got overlooked in our haste to get things out the door. We would do the oil change, so to speak, but not take a look at the fuel injector, or whatever item was there that maybe could have used a good look-see, and then suddenly, well, didn't we just have that in there yesterday? Well, yeah, for an oil change. These guys can take a look at this stuff much more holistically than they did in the past, and that's where the benefits of wellness and proactivity, I think, are going to come out as time goes on. But I looked at it, and I think I joked with those guys, yeah, but parts are up. But I think parts are up because they're finding, well, maybe we ought to replace this now rather than wait or ignore it. I think we were burying our heads in the sand in some respects. Now they have time to fix it and say, you know what, you won't be back for a long time, except for real routine stuff, if we take care of these things now. So I think it's an absolute work in progress, and our folks are really making good use of their time now that they have the facility to do it.
And another thing to we'll maybe talk about later, but one important piece of the puzzle that still isn't in place is the automated wash system. And, we spend quite a bit of money on issues related to just underbody rust and things like that, where the equipment just doesn't get cleaned off in the winter. And that new system is going to be taking care of a lot of that. We're very confident that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, it's the same philosophy of, okay, after a snowstorm, you drive your car down the street, what happens? Your car gets full of salt. What do? You take it to the car wash to get it washed off so your car lasts longer. They don't have the facility to be able to do that to all the equipment right now. Once that's installed and in place, then, that's another step in the kind of preventative maintenance to prolong the life of those vehicles.
Timeline on getting that up and running?
It'll go out for bid right after the first of the year, if it's approved in the budget.
I'll wait on that one. With that said, Kevin, you're going to owe me one for the next thing I'm going to say. Even though I suggested we do CIPs another day, I think in this case with Kevin's division, I would suggest that we go to the CIP book for the equipment, for the vehicles and the wash bay and those types of things. I'll draw your attention to page 2016-36. And I think Kevin already started talking about it. I think it's appropriate to have that discussion and I think we can knock off a lot of things, and they do tie in well together, and I think that was one of the things that I heard from council members. It's nice to talk about an operating budget and then a CIP impact. On page 36, towards the bottom, this is public property improvements, non-utility. Earlier, we talked about people, the waters, we talked about senior center, now we're down to the auto wash system for the Public Works Field Operations Facility. That was the one item that ended up on the cutting room floor for the basic project. That was the area that's still gravel, the garage area, garage space that's gravel filled. And I think Kevin already made the pitch for it. That's in there at $225,000. It really is unfinished business for the facility. And then the second one below that is the landscaping. Kevin, you're planning to try to use as much of your folks as possible.
Correct. That number there would be primarily for the materials of plants, things like that. We're going to do our best to have staff install majority of it. We've already done what you see there right now, and so the guys are more than capable, and we're planning on doing the same.
Kevin, did staff lay all the sod last year?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
I'll do the other one next.
We also did all of the stormwater,
All the bark mulch and stuff.
bark
and the
mulch,
biofilter.
sand, we helped with that.
And that's a big part of the landscaping, in addition to getting, trees, shrubs, those types of landscaping items to, make sure the site is in compliance with the zoning code requirements. Those biofilters, getting those planted with appropriate plants. Like, if you look at the biofilters out here in the City Hall parking lot, we got those planted with plants earlier this year. It helps hold that bark mulch in place. It helps treat the stormwater that's running through them. So that's a critical piece of the puzzle of making sure that those facilities work as intended.
And after that, then we're going to talk about the equipment for the for Public Works, and I would draw your attention first off to major equipment, page 42, the mobile column lifts. Kevin, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, the mobile column lifts are for lifting the vehicles in the garage itself. Instead of using a traditional, if you take your vehicle into the shop, they put it on the lift, an in-floor lift, and just because of the nature of that type of piece of lifting equipment, it restricts movement through the bays, and so these are individual mobile column lifts that they'll place under the tires, and it'll lift the vehicle.
How many is,
We're planning on 6, depending on how the bid comes in.
And then on page 43 are the street division vehicles. I would say there's still a pretty modest level of requests because Kevin and his folks know that getting the facility operational is really key, and they've been deferring some equipment purchases the last couple of years out of the need to get these other things done. But the fifth item down on page 43 is a plow and wing. So Kevin, why don't you just go through those 4 items?
Sure. Every year we try to get one tandem replaced, and this year we're looking to replace what we call number 64, and that's a truck that also serves as a leaf vac this time of year. So that's why you see that leaf vac with front mount. It's kind of a package deal right there, and that vehicle there has a maintenance history that's rather extensive and some other issues. It was purchased at the time with a plastic box, and that was something that was tried back then. Has not lasted or worked quite well, and so that's why that one's on the list.
I guess in theory it doesn't rust. So, but it's not.
All the other components do though, because you have ribbing that has to, contain that plastic box, and those things are. Travis, I don't know if you wanted to comment on any more of it, but
yeah, and that's another issue. Speaking of the wash, another issue you run into, which 64 has problems with the hydraulic tank, the fuel tank, the air tanks, everything involved in the undercarriage is starting to get fairly rusty on there, and when you get into having to replace those components so that vehicle is available when it's needed for leaf hauling and snow hauling, that can get expensive. When, you know, with that wash in place, that's something that will be able to extend the life of some of these vehicles so that, you know, maybe the truck is 10 years old, but it's been maintained, it's been washed. You'll be able to get that additional few years of life out of it where it's still practical to run it. But this is one of those cases where that unit has, you know, the undercarriage is deteriorating, the, you know, the plow, the wing, the box ribs, like you said, just from, you know, the wear and tear it suffers, and then not being able to get completely clean at the end of the usage of it. So.
And I think one of the other important factors to keep in mind, you know, when they're proposing to put one of these vehicles in, it's not because it's 10 years old, and I think, you know, that's something we can get into a little bit more, especially into sanitation, is we might have 3 vehicles that are the same age, but Travis takes a good look at what is the maintenance history and how much am I spending to keep each one of these vehicles on the road. If I've got 3 vehicles that are the same age and I'm spending $100,000 a year on one and only $20,000 a year on the other 2, well, I'm going to replace the one that I'm spending $100,000 a year on to keep it on the street. And that's something that, you know, Travis has done a good job identifying which one of the vehicles really needs to be replaced versus, you know, one that is, you know, not costing us as much, and we can, you know, keep it operational for another year or 2 before we really have to look at replacing it.
Kevin, you mentioned, you know, this is, you kind of want to replace a dump truck a year. Or are you continuing to look at just replacing same truck for truck, or are you looking to get more like a multi-use truck as you start to replace, so that you get maybe 2 or 3 things you can do with that truck versus just one duty?
No, we always look at the multi-use, and this is a good example where it is also a leaf collection vehicle. But all of our tandem dump trucks are multi-use, multi-purpose vehicles, and they're plowing snow, they're hauling demolition debris, they're hauling materials, you know, so they're high usage vehicle.
Okay.
That kind of, you know, actually I'll skip over the brine system and talk about the tractor that we're looking to replace. It's a 1994 Tiger. That's another example of multi-use situation. We currently have 2 similar tractors that fall into that. They're used for primarily mowing and ditch work. And this particular unit that we're replacing has had multiple issues, but we're looking to replace it with more of a multi-purpose tractor. And that would allow us then, when the other one comes up for replacement in a couple of years, we can say, well, we can either run it until it drops, or we can try and sell it at auction straight up. So that's what that particular piece of equipment is. It's also used to plow snow as well, that tractor is, in the winter. The one I skipped over is the new brine system. That's part of our, sounds like you've all been over and seen the dome. That's that building that's attached to it. The brine system is a piece of equipment where we will now be able to make our own brine, which we use for pre-wetting the salt before we place it on the road, as well as anti-icing. When you'll see the trucks out, you know, and they leave those lines of, looks like liquid in the street or out on the highway, that's our anti-icing, which we get out proactively before storms, and that prevents the snow and ice from bonding to the street. And so this piece of equipment, instead of buying our brine from Winnebago County, which is, there's significant costs involved. We take one of our semi-tankers out there, and it's actually a full day process to load off of their system and then unload into our tank back at our location. So this system, fully automated, basically we take our, you know, scoop of salt, dump it in the water, the machine mixes it up to the proper salinity and fills our tank. So.
it'll help improve efficiencies, especially with all the other earlier things we discussed.
Yay, automation.
That's the equipment, that way Kevin doesn't need to come back, Kevin and Travis don't need to come back for CIP discussions. It's not my intent to do all CIPs, but the ones that are relevant, I thought would be appropriate to get done now. And then, at this point, Mayor, I think we've been back at it for 2 hours. Would you like to take a break before we do
We'd all like to stretch our legs a little bit and walk around.
So we'll do sanitation soon, Bob. Thank you.
Oh, we got to get done at 3. Steve? I know you. Sanitation guys.
The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. You're watching City Cable 10, your source for government programming in the Oshkosh area. Simulcast on 101.9 FM WOCT and streamed on the World Wide Web at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. Please stay tuned for continued coverage. For broadcast times of local government meetings, check our website at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org.
Mr. Mayor, the next budget in Public Works, it will be sanitation, garbage collection and disposal. It begins on page 137. And
I think if you look, Mark, that one.
yeah, that one switched over, so.
Transferred to a different.
Yeah, so we'll switch, I didn't realize that we put it that way, okay. Let's just go to recycling, page 139. This one I did talk briefly about in my opening presentation yesterday and mentioned it in the, in my budget message. This is no longer levy supported. We enacted a recycling fee after 2013, so it is in 2014 that we had the fee get created. Since that time, the market continues to drop for recyclables, and additionally, the state has reduced state aid by about $50,000 for us for 2016. You can see that the deficit is building in that fund. Now, that's, I think the number that shows 519 for 2014 is probably the number, it says ending fund balance. That's the number you want to work from. The purpose of the fund balance here is not for operational costs. It's to really set aside reserves for equipment replacement. Unlike, say, trucks that Kevin purchases for streets that have a life of 20 years, our recycling and refuse trucks have a much shorter life because they are used day in, day out. Very heavy, hard work being done on them. We cannot purchase our recycling trucks through any borrowing method. Their life is not long enough to warrant borrowing for them. So we have to purchase those trucks. So with that, because of those underlying issues, our recycling fee was started out at $20, and we're proposing an increase to $35. I know that that is a very difficult thing to do, but if we're going to replace equipment as we need to on this schedule, we need to have a funding source. So we can talk about options for funding sources, but the reality is the vehicles are nearing the end of their useful life, and we need to start purchasing replacement vehicles. So with that, I'm going to turn over to James and his staff to talk about the recycling program.
I think, Bob, I'll turn it over to you a little bit and let you, kind of give a little bit of a brief overview, and then I think you can, get into some of the things that Mark has mentioned earlier about some of the improvements in efficiency that we're seeing from our staff, from these automated systems.
Okay, in 2009, we started with the single stream truck, and at that time we purchased 3 trucks. With the 3 trucks, we're going to be in 2016, which with depreciation and that, they're going to be off the books next year. With our repair costs, which are constantly going up, the recycling trucks probably almost take a harder beating than the garbage trucks because they're compacting cardboard, glass, and glass just eats away at that steel. I mean, we probably place more steel in a truck than people realize with that.
Yeah, I think one thing that, to think about glass, what is glass? It's heated and compressed sand. So you're basically sandblasting the inside of that truck every time you're compacting a piece of glass.
So then when we went to the garbage in 2012, we bought 5 CNG trucks at that time, plus another recycling truck. Well, we have not replaced any of our single stream trucks. And in 2016, they'll be 7 years old, and what's starting to happen is the repair costs are starting to outweigh the efficiency we're getting out of these trucks. The downtime is getting greater, is what I'm saying to you, when trucks have to get repaired. Lucky we have Travis here. He diagnoses them a lot faster and he gets at them, but it's still that downtime in these trucks. It's the little things that keep adding up on.
Is it though the CNG side of the truck?
This is the diesel side.
The Packer.
The Packer. It's a Packer.
The Packer in the back. It's not the engine.
This was pre-CNG anyway.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to point out.
The ones we're talking about are diesel.
The 3 vehicles are prior to us getting any CNG.
Right. Okay.
I think if you look at the capital outlay request on page 144, Bob noted there were 3 vehicles that were purchased in 2009. The capital outlay request is for replacement of 2 of those 3 vehicles. And, it gets back to the point we made earlier with, Travis keeping a good eye on the actual maintenance costs of the vehicles, recognizing the fact that, there's just, it had been extraordinarily difficult to try to fund 3 vehicle replacements. So we turned to Travis and said, okay, if you got to pick 2 out of these 3, which 2? And he's like, well, I'm taking these 2 that are costing us, so much more than the other one, and the other one we can, shift off onto maybe a little bit lighter route, or onto the half route.
What we do right now is we have shifted one of the trucks, because what we did this year, through efficiency of the guys and the layout of our routes, we have been able to eliminate one person, which we took half of that person from recycling and half of it from garbage. So we have one gentleman now that runs a half a route of recycling and a half a route of garbage. So that truck, that extra one, which would be probably 211, is a recycling truck from 2009. We would just use on that half route in the future.
How many rear loaders do we still have left, and are any of them to the point?
Those are all in garbage right now.
The thing with that is we got 4 of them left. And for the amount of use that we get with the rear loaders anymore, we use them for violations and
Right.
brush pickup.
Right.
I think we can extend them out a few more years before we got to replace those. At this time, I don't think that would be a
Big issue.
big bang for our buck, because
Okay.
the only thing would be is if we ever got into a flood system or another flood stage.
No, we don't want to go there.
The rear loaders are the only thing that picked it up.
One stormwater utility is working very diligently to prevent this from happening.
I'm just thinking down the line, we're going to need rear loader dump trucks for just the same reason you said, is,
why
are
we
we
kept
putting them,
Yeah.
a rotation plan of one maybe
Yes.
every once in a while?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think those are still used for some of the garbage collection from city facilities as well,
Yes,
correct?
Right.
Yes, we pick up dumpsters from city
Just city
facilities.
facilities.
Okay.
Yeah, I was under the impression that when we first got into recycling, that the hydraulics would be more of a problem with the recycling equipment, the rear loaders. Has that come true, or was just bad information?
We do have more issues with the hydraulic hoses. There's more hydraulic hoses and cylinders on them. There's more moving parts in the automated arm. But the Labreeze, in my experience, having dealt with the Bridgeports and the McNeiliuses, I'm impressed with how they've handled the amount of time they've been out on the road. They seem like they're holding up pretty good. But there's wear in the chains, there's cylinders that like to leak, there's hydraulic hoses that move a lot when the arm goes in and out, that we end up replacing on a fair amount, yes.
Okay.
So this time it would be putting money in the budget, but, we wouldn't be purchasing this year, correct?
We would be looking to replace 2 vehicles.
Two vehicles in
Two this
2000.
year.
They'd be 7 years old at that
Okay.
point.
And is there any like municipal, you work with another agency that's buying 2 or 3, we're buying 2, 3. Now the purchase is 10 of them, but they go to different agencies to get a better cost. Have we looked at that? I know we've done that in some of our other purchasing.
We've done some of that in the past. It can be difficult trying to match up
Okay.
timing of those types of things, but we do talk to the different vendors that, everybody gets, the same treatment, so they'll let us know if they have other orders coming up. And I'd like to point out, too, that the money that we have set aside are for CNG, because the CNG vehicles are a little bit pricier. That's starting to come down a little bit, but we budgeted for CNG.
Okay. And then, are we, forget it.
One of the things that Trina has been following this issue with Public Works, and I think she wants to frame it just so, from a fund balance standpoint, with respect to equipment replacement, because, like I said, the only reason the fund balance exists is for equipment replacement.
So one thing I think that we need to go over is, when you look at the fund balance, this looks like a very healthy fund with a good fund balance. But the one thing that I need to explain better is truly the system of how we accumulate for our truck purchases. In 2014, we made a reserve payment, or we budgeted an expense for a truck of $170,700. That designation brought, or should have brought, the fund balance for equipment purchase to $936,000 in 2014. And you'll see we have the fund balance of $519,708. In 2015, we made another reserve expense payment for another $170,700. So what we should have in our fund balance today for just equipment replacement is $1,106,700. However, as you can see in our existing fund balance, that's not what we have. After we purchase 2 trucks, if we purchase the 2 proposed trucks in 2016, we will be removing $570,000 from the fund, and then we should have a balance of $707,400. You'll see that we are projecting with those purchases that fund balance to be negative. So unfortunately, what has happened is when this fund was taken and made independent of the general fund, it was a fund that was levy funded when it was within the general fund. When we moved it out, we took the levy funding out, but unfortunately the fees that were set up have not been sufficient to cover the operations and the capital needs of the fund. That is thereby why we're requesting an increased fee, because if we don't start to support our needed capital, we're not going to have a sustainable fund.
Shall we point out that recycling, again, is a state mandated program, that they continue to reduce the funding that we receive from the state? That's, again, putting us in a very difficult financial position.
We have a city ordinance that states you have to recycle. Like, I know garbage.
Yes.
Each resident's required.
We're required to have the ordinance.
So if people say, well, it's too expensive, I'm not going to.
States, ordinance
Big deal.
states.
I don't understand.
The state forced us into recycling.
And the fee
then pulled
goes
the
on
funds away
the tax bill, correct, Mark? The fee for the recycling is on their tax bill?
Is on the tax bill.
So they really don't have if they pay their taxes, they pay that fee.
And interestingly enough, because a couple years ago, we were going to do some change in the water fee and charge the general, or get the general fund some money, and the law was changed that you can't do that. You can't enact all these fees. Communities that don't have a stormwater utility, if they enact one now, they have to reduce their property tax. The state gave one exemption, and that was for recycling fees. And then they cut the recycling grants. Coincidence? I think not. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's almost as if they telegraphed us, well, this one will be okay on because we plan on cutting you down the road. That's Mark's conspiracy theory.
I would totally support it.
But I think there's some validity to it.
I think the rest of us at the table would as well.
And
And there was
unfortunately,
conversation this year about removing the exemption off of the recycling. What you have to do when you raise your revenue, you have to make a negative levy adjustment, because the state is saying you're exceeding the levy limits by raising your fees, and so you're double dipping. But there was conversations this year to eliminate recycling from that exemption and force you to take the reduction in your levy limit.
so that's the long story in terms of why we're proposing the increase. Certainly, it's not something that we do lightly, but it is something we feel is necessary.
Do you think by raising the fee, you will have more people recycling?
No.
Like that, since
don't
they're paying
think-
for it, they're going to utilize this service
No,
more than...
I would not say that at all.
I
I do think it will help them be more aware of it, and actually with
The initial
some of...
shock.
It's the initial shock, and some of the things that we're coming out with, like the brochure and the stuff, we're hoping that every citizen in the city gets it, that's going to help our recycling program. I know starting
are
next
you
year, I'm going to
notifying
partner with the county, and we're going to go into schools and stuff and keep promoting the recycling program, because that's where it's at. The biggest problem we have with the recycling, honestly, is the college kids aren't here 365 days of the year. And they're gone half the year, so we lose out that recycling part of it. If you're looking at the weights and stuff like that, we don't get much in there once they're out of school. When they're here, it comes in groves.
A lot of aluminum.
A lot of
A lot of glass.
Counselor Pansky's question raised another point that I think needs to get raised. One of the other fee increases that we did in the past that I think backfired on us was the green waste fee. And Bob analyzed that, and Bob, your recommendation was to leave that alone.
Yes, yes.
The yard waste drop-off.
We
The
did
yard
go
waste drop-off
down.
fee.
When we raised that fee, we went down about 600 permits since then.
Close to 15% reduction.
Reduction, yeah.
So we've hit the wall. We cannot touch that. I wouldn't necessarily say if we reduced it, more people would go. We just need to leave it alone.
Yes.
Right.
Just flat out, just leave it alone.
Yeah.
And for residents, that's one fee that we do have a very high surcharge for non-residents, and that differential I think is appropriate, but we don't need to hit the residents with that fee anymore. This is a much more effective way to do it.
How are you notifying citizens of this fee increase?
So far, we haven't done nothing with it, with the fee increase.
I think that-
But once I
first-
do got to start to answer for it, it's going to go back to our decrease in commodity price, our decrease in state
I think
funding.
what she's asking is what kind of educational
Are we going to
campaign are we
notify
going to
them at-
undertake?
Oh, we'll have it on the website, I will not put it in the brochure because the brochure is dealing with the day-to-day activities, but I'll have it out there in different areas.
I imagine you'll put something in the tax bill.
The paper will probably mention
They'll
it.
pick it up.
Emily's going to be talking to me about it on shows. I think it's got to be part of when we do have the public hearing. I think we got to have it out there. It's being discussed here, but the more we talk about it, we've got to be open about it and why it's happening, because, it's a $15 increase, and it's pretty substantial when you
If
think about
that's where it
percentage.
gets approved at.
We proposed it that, yeah.
Is that something you could maybe bring up? Because don't you go on Bob's show every now and then, too?
Yes, I do. And, yeah, and I think that's between Bob and just across the board, we need to educate people about the reasons why we're proposing it in the first place. Prior to the hearing, prior to council's final approval on something like this.
Are you finding that a lot of people aren't bothering to recycle? They're just putting everything in the garbage container?
Actually, one of the first things our drivers are taught is if you don't see it, if it's Blue Carrot Week and you're picking up just a garbage can, make sure we're looking in that camera. Because we want to know if there's any, when they pull it up, every cart that gets pulled up, our drivers look right in that camera. And the first thing they do, if there's not a blue cart there, they look at that thing and because they will pull it right back out and tag you. And then and I got a 201 that helps out. We actually will knock on the door and explain what happened and try to make the citizen aware that we will not pick it up and we're going to keep an eye on you.
Bob, what's a 201?
That's I'm 200, 201's a second in command.
All right, that being said, under our recycling ordinance, if citizens are starting to put recycling in the garbage, besides talking to them, if it continues, can we cite them?
Yes, oh yes. The next day, actually, we have the violation truck. Because what happens is our daily driver will write down that address and he'll put a number 5, plastic mixed or recyclables mixed with garbage. And then the next day, our driver goes back there, and if they didn't clean it up, and if it's not off the curb, they will get a citation.
Okay.
$25 plus administrative fee of $25.
Well, that could be one area we could raise just there. $25 isn't all that big a deal, but, okay.
So that's kind of the recycling fund. If there's no other questions, then we can move to the refuse. It's technically the refuse fund, but the refuse fund is completely supported by levy. There's some minor fees and charges, but they're really related to carts, when people buy carts and things like that. It's proposed at $1,252,000, which is actually a reduction, and that's reflective of the reduction of a 1/2 time person on the refuse side, as well as the adjustments with health insurance. The fund is, because it's levy funded, we do have to keep our goal is to keep the fund balance at 0, and we're doing all right there, so we're going to manage that for next year. The levy is due to go down by $100,000 because of our fund balance and the savings that Bob and his staff have been able to achieve. Biggest line item after personnel is landfill fees. I know, Kevin, Bob, anything you guys want to add?
Landfill fees for next year, recycling will stay the same at $5 per ton. And the garbage side, it will go up $1 per ton to $38 per ton. And at the landfill site, you see a $41 charge if you were to go out there yourself for next year, but we get a $3 rebate back from them.
I think the performance measure is something to take a look at and recognize that citizen survey, we have a good response, quality of service, and positive review of the service. Is there anything else with this one? James, Bob, or council?
Mark, just a question. Maybe it was already answered. We levy the garbage, but we charge our citizens for recycling. Is that because of state statute, or why don't we, not that I want to add a fee to our garbage bin per se, but why are we using levy dollars for garbage and not levy dollars for recycling?
This goes back to a long history, which some people will point to the demise of my predecessor by proposing a garbage fee. That was met with extreme resistance. This was about 2 years before I was here. I think Mr. Fitzpatrick can probably provide as much history as anything, but it was proposed, the council actually adopted it, and the backlash was so severe that the council rescinded it shortly thereafter. That has been a real issue. Oddly enough, it probably led to some of the reasons for cuts in streets, because what suffered, streets ended up suffering because the revenue wasn't coming, and they had to the council and the city manager had to find savings somewhere else, so they cut the street side of things. It was a vicious cycle we were in there, but that issue's been out there.
But why, if the citizens are so upset with a garbage fee, why aren't they upset about a recycling fee? It's the same thing, really. In essence, they're...
Times are different.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain it. I think the way it was laid out in this case explained it a little more effectively. There's a big debate from a policy standpoint, and this is something that the council does want to consider. The recycling fee was pretty much because we could, and the state was telegraphing to us that recycling fees were okay because we're going to be cutting recycling revenue. There are no garbage grants, so you're on your own for garbage. You talk to a business person, the business person would actually prefer that approach because refuse only benefits residential, single family, and up to what, 4 family?
4 family.
4 family, thank you, Bob. It's up to 4 family. So from a business standpoint, taking off the tax roll would be a wonderful idea from their standpoint because they're not getting that service. The residences may feel differently. Some residences don't want the fee. for general dislike of fees. The other part of it is, if you keep it on the tax roll, at least I get a tax write-off when I pay my property tax bill. Those are the general pros and cons to that argument. It's not that I wouldn't say don't ever go back to that issue again, but I think you want to test the waters on that one. And maybe it got sprung on them a little too quickly. Sometimes it's how it gets delivered, not what you're delivering. And I think we talked about the recycling fee for months in advance. And I think Mr. Fitzpatrick gave me fair warning. Mark, be aware of what happened before you were here. And so we did lay it out. We did a lot of discussion with the council before that. And it went over a little better, but unfortunately, fees are the way.
I think, too, it was a new, it's a new program, or was a new program, and I think the timing is right, that people were becoming more and more aware of the need to recycle. So I think that you're kind of
Put more
agreeing that-
focus on the
Right,
recycling.
the
side of it.
timing was right, I guess, is the way to
Well,
put it.
the fees that surrounding communities that don't offer this through a municipal service, are our rates comparable to, I mean, ours is levy supported, so when you average that out based on per property, are we delivering that service more efficiently than some of the private industry that contracts with other municipalities around us?
I would say yes.
Yes, we are.
By far.
I actually, before Advance got in there and Viola was in there, I actually talked to the guy who ran it, and he said for what you get as a taxpayer in that city, he goes, I couldn't even touch you. He goes, what I'd have to put in there for equipment and that, if I had to do it as a whole city with 21,000 households. And that's the one thing people don't realize, there's 21,000 houses in the city, and each one of them's got a cart, and some got 4 carts if it's a fourplex.
And they might certainly bid it out cheaper to get their foot in the door.
Yes.
And then raise the rates once we no longer have the
And
facilities.
in the long
to-
term, you know, when you have that private contractor, we lose control,
Yeah.
and you get, you know,
Well,
the complaints.
What I'm
not doing
focusing
this,
on is,
not doing that.
if we're going to talk about a garbage fee, when we're going to say, oh, well, they're paying X amount per house, and we're going to deliver that same service, and here's your fee, we're going to be less than that because we're delivering a more efficient service, and we're investing in our infrastructure and our personnel to make sure that we're delivering that as efficiently as possible. And that comes down to marketing, whether it's levy support or a fee-based support, that we're continuing to deliver a quality service, which is highly rated by our citizens. It shows that we're making the right commitment.
If you were to just do some, and I just did sort of napkin, on top of a napkin approach to this, if you took the levy support for garbage collection and the fee for recycling, and assuming it at $35, not over, I don't want to over-presume, but just assuming that it comes to under $90 a year, and there are plenty of communities that are paying well over $100. So I think we are, the way we have it structured right now, I think we're providing a reasonable service. Now, that doesn't include a lot of overhead, and you could probably get it in there, but I think for the most part, you're in the ballpark on providing a very cost-effective service. Any more questions on garbage? If not, it would be appropriate to move into utilities.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Kevin, Bob, and Travis. Steve and Ken, would you like to join us?
We're going to start with the water utility.
Whether you'd like to or not, would you join us?
On page 253. The budget proposed at $12,152,000, so pretty on average with some of our increases. It's certainly, it's more dealing with debt expenses as much as anything else. But our principal payment on debt's going from $4.8 million to $5.4 million, so that's a $600,000 increase. And when you take a look at our increase of about budget to budget, about $300,000 increase, or about $500,000 estimate to budget, it's virtually all debt service, but we're cognizant that we need to keep an eye on things because of rate increases. And we're going to have a busy year next year with water towers and things like that. Trina, anything we need to add to that? Trina has a utility experience. We have our utility finance person, Ken, here. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, James, and the finance staff on this one.
And I think, one thing that, probably is not included with this packet, but, goes along with, with the utilities, all three utilities, is, the financial analysis that Ellers has done for the three utilities, and, the materials that were shared with council at the workshop about 4 or 5 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important piece of how, that information comes together with this information. So it's, it's not two completely different things. They are very well tied together.
And when you look at utilities, again, think of us in terms of production facilities, factories, industries. Our labor costs are just over 30%, so 70% of our costs are other than labor. And that includes capital cost of equipment, operations, maintenance, financing, regulatory fees, and things like that. We're assuming about a 4% increase in electricity. We're assuming a small increase in our chemical usages, which again are variable depending on water quality and things like that. So really, the rest of it gets into debt service, and then essentially, small increases for just everyday costs.
Yeah, I think, one thing that Steve brings up is a very good point. The amount of chemicals that are needed to treat our drinking water vary dramatically based on, our weather conditions and the quality of the water in Lake Winnebago. Our drinking water comes directly from Lake Winnebago, and if we have, an exceptionally hot summer, and all of a sudden we're seeing, significant increases in algae blooms or the blue-green algae or things like that, that plays a significant impact on the cost of chemicals that it takes to treat our water to be able to provide safe drinking water to all the properties within the city.
And then along with that increases number of backwashes, which puts more pressure on production and those types of things. So, we try and minimize expenses wherever we can, but our bottom line is we've got to protect public health and provide water for public safety. So that's our focus, and that's our focus, and that's our mission. So that's why we do see some variability in our operating costs and overall costs from year to year. And we do have some big projects coming, as everyone is aware. So, as we get into those, council will be aware of what's happening as we progress on those things.
And I think the water utility, we truly rely on a large amount of infrastructure to deliver our quality product. And much in like what we've talked about with our streets, our infrastructure is a little behind and needing much improvement. And those improvements are very costly, and they will impact our rates. However, to provide a quality water product and to provide continued service to our ratepayers, it's investment that we do need to make. But again, to reinforce James, we are trying to do that in a methodical way, thereby trying to spread and not spike the rates, and try to maintain affordable rates and competitive rates for our ratepayers.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, when we're looking at, big infrastructure projects, We've had some long-term planning taking place in order to more effectively and efficiently get our treated water out of the treatment plant and into the distribution system. Right now, there's one primary line that leaves the plant. We're trying to get, some redundancy, some backup designed into that. So as we're doing our long-range planning for that, we're tying those plans together with planned street reconstruction projects. So we can start looking at this and saying, okay, we know we need to get this secondary route out of the plant. We know we've got these projects coming up. So let's look at getting this secondary main transmission feeder line from the plant into the system and constructing it in conjunction with capital projects that are planned, streets, sanitary, water, storm, so we're not going in and digging up a street just to put in a water distribution main. We're tying all those projects together to keep our overall capital expenditures as low as we can and still be able to provide the level of service, not only from quality drinking water, but, supporting our emergency services is, I think, even more critical than the drinking water aspect of it.
James, anything you want to point out with expenses, or probably appropriate to talk about CIPs, some of the major CIPs, when you're talking about each of the individual utilities, because you cannot separate the operating and the capital budgets too far.
No, I think, like Steve mentioned earlier, a lot of this operating budget is repayment of capital. I think, there are something, what's that, Steve?
Like you say, principal payment on debt and stuff like that.
Right, yeah, it's, as Trina mentioned, this infrastructure is aging just like, all of our other infrastructure is, and, we need to make sure that, we're continuing to provide, good, safe services. I think, Steve, I don't know if there was anything we wanted to really hit on the expense side of things.
With your permission, Mark, I'd like to hand out just that outline of the comprehensive plans that are included in both the budgets.
That'd be a great idea.
I have that for everybody. One of the key features in what we're working at, and this all fits into the whole planning and process and looking long-term to do the things we need to do, and also be able to take those long-term look-aheads on rates and debt service and determine project criteria by criticality. This is a general outline for water and wastewater utility comprehensive plans, and I have funds included in both budgets for the comprehensive plan. And in addition to that, I have an asset management project included in the wastewater budget. We've actually completed that activity in the water utility. But those are both critical parts of this planning process. And I think for us to identify, document, and put together something that we can use to inform the public and give everybody a better idea what's happening with utilities, I think it's important for us to take this step and go to comprehensive planning. And the thing I'd like to point out in both utilities is the second item noted in there. It's public engagement in the comprehensive plan. As we go forward with these critical projects and maintaining our assets, we're seeing there's potential rate increases involved with these. And I think it's really important that we put together a long-term plan. We get public involvement with that plan and help the public understand what we do as utilities, why we're doing it, and give them opportunities to understand it and provide feedback to all of us, so that we can have a dialogue and an ongoing discussion on what utilities are, what we do, and get the public a higher level of awareness and make them part of the process as far as knowing what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why we're moving forward with certain things. So that's one of the things I think it's most important about the comprehensive planning process and how I think it's something that can really be of benefit both to the utilities and to the ratepayers out there. You know, we're kind of a victim of our own success. One of the phrases we use in the utility business is out of sight, out of mind. You know, you can turn a tap on, you can push a handle down, and water comes and water goes, and that's it. And it's really hard to heighten that awareness.
Unless you don't have it for a while.
Yeah,
I was
right.
on vacation with the kids, and where we were, we did not have running water. And I lasted 15 days before I had to go somewhere else. So I will never, ever complain about the water bill or the rates, because when it's gone and you don't have that, and when you find a pipe across the street that you have to get into and your water comes out brown, yeah, I appreciate every single thing that you do.
Well, thank you, and I think that you know that we've made a lot of progress in the 13 years I've been here. It's going from a more reactive stand to a more proactive stance. But again, the challenge has been getting public involvement, and I think because of the public engagement process involved with comprehensive planning, that will really help us step up and get the public involved with what's going on, which will help us when it comes to providing information on new projects and helping people understand why the rates are where they are, and that we're really trying to hold the line as much as we can on these things, but also having to play catch-up for a 20 to 30-year period where there were decisions made to not replace utilities in conjunction with streets, and now we don't only have the stuff we need to replace now, but we also have the stuff that we needed replaced 20, 30 years ago.
I can speak from experience. I get the bad calls. Somebody's really upset, they're calling me. And when we raised the rates in 2014, everybody called up, they're thinking that our rates went to pay for the new street department. Because they were not, they were not, you know, informed of why we're raising our utility rates. And I think when Steve started talking about the comprehensive plan and letting the public know, I mean, I'm saying that is what we need to do. You know, we should have been doing this a while, because they should know. I mean, rates are going to go up, but there's a reason. And I think if you tell them honestly, you know, to their face, why we're doing this, I think they're going to buy in. You know, but got to tell them why we're raising the rates. So.
Talking about, I mean, out of sight, out of mind is absolutely correct, and we have a marketing and education and information when it comes to all the utilities. That's what our goal is to continue to be, and as rates increase, we have to get better at that, because we have to make the correlation that the money you're spending here, the bill you get every quarter, goes right here. It doesn't go into some fund that runs into a pocket somewhere. It's that water tower is still standing. When the fire department hooks up to a hydrant, it's there. And so as we continue to pursue our capital needs and our deferred maintenance from decisions that were made years ago, now we're footing the bill.
And I think one of the things, you know, a first step towards some of that is there's been a lot of discussion and involvement surrounding the replacement of the Marion Road Tower. You know, I think that's a good starting point for how we can start to involve, you know, the general public in, you know, some of these things that are identified in these comprehensive plans that Steve is talking about. You know, I don't think there's any doubt that, you know, we need to do something, you know, with the tower, and I think there's been a lot of good conversations over the last 2 years probably surrounding that project, and, you know, getting to a point where, you know, we're getting a lot closer to being able to have a construction project to, you know, replace that tower and, you know, improve the efficiency, the effectiveness, you know, the ability to provide, you know, water for emergency services, the ability to provide, you know, water to our, you know, residents and properties at, you know, a pressure that, you know, when you flush the toilet, it flushes, not it just dribbles because there's no water pressure. You know, I think that's one thing that is difficult to try to explain to people is, why, the pressures need to be what they are, because, water just, it doesn't just flow, it's gravity based. The pumps at the plant, inject energy, but primarily, the pressure in your system that allows your toilet to flush. If you don't have enough water pressure in your line, your toilet isn't going to flush. And it's the towers that give us that.
And really, the towers function for fire protection. If it was residential use only, industrial or commercial, we would need that. But when you have to get 4,500 gallons per minute to a fire hydrant for the fire department for certain commercial industrial zones to fight a fire, that's where the really significant dollars in our infrastructure are, is making sure that we can meet those fire protection requirements. So,
And a critical part to that is being able to meet those fire protection requirements with our water distribution system has a direct impact on our property insurance. If our water distribution system was, in a worse condition and we weren't able to supply adequate fire flows, everybody's property insurance in the city would go up because there's a greater risk that the insurance company is going to have to pay out more money in case of an incident. So it's the reliability of our water distribution system has a direct impact on, homeowners insurance, property insurance for businesses. It's direct and,
I just went through this reevaluation with my insurance. My insurance agent mentioned that if I were in another community within the state of Wisconsin, my exact property would be $500 a year more expensive to insure because of the quality of their water and their water supply system and their fire department compared to the system that we have here in the city of Oshkosh. So it's only one property, but
I believe our system is, it's either 40 or 50% of the fire department's rating is based on the water system.
Well, with that said, the investment in the water utility is a function of our rates, and we did have a workshop a while back where we talked about that. Ellers came. I think you guys have set the table as well as you can in terms of the need for it, but the rate increase is reflected in here. Trina, can you
So it would be a 15% rate increase. The rate increase would take effect upon the PSC approval. We would anticipate that approval date to be coming around April 1st, 2016. The Public Service Commission will do a test run or a test trial of all of our expenses and our debt, and they only allow us a certain rate of return. Our utility is not in business to make profit. We're in business to provide services to our citizens. And so what we are anticipating through that rate case is that we will be approved for a 15% rate increase implemented approximately April 1st, 2016. And that is the revenue estimates that you've received. Those revenues have been calculated on the basis of that.
primary reason, there's a lot of operating costs that we have to fulfill, but the debt reinvesting in our underground utilities, as well as, in this case, the tower, the debt really isn't directly related to the tower yet, because we haven't even done that work, but it's the improvements that we've done the last few years into the system. So that's what we're looking at. You can see from page 255, it's kind of covered, but the debt ratio, we have to cover the debt ratio, and we also have to have a certain rate of return. The Public Service Commission will look at it. If they think 15% is too high, they will tell us, and they will not authorize a penny more than what they feel we need. Conversely, if they said 15% wasn't enough, they will also do that. They've been known to identify communities that have tried to lowball their utilities because politically it's not acceptable, and the PSC will call them on it and say, no, we're sorry, you need to increase your rates more. Public Service Commission is the final call for water. That's not necessarily, it's not the case for sewer. They're not regulated by the Public Service Commission. Neither is stormwater, but water is, but the same principles still apply. Rate of return still applies, debt ratio. We cannot get away without having adequate debt ratio or our ratings and our ratings will go down and our rates for borrowing will go up. So that's the other governor that's on us on this. What I would suggest we do is maybe go through water, wastewater, then maybe go back to Steve's CIPs, which are so interrelated, and then I think we can knock that. That may be sufficient enough for the day. If we had a little time left, James has got to come back for CIP. We can do storm utility because that's still his baby for the time being. But the water utility, it's a massive, it's a large budget, but it's a lot of treatment plant operations and debt. So I don't want to cut you off if you have questions, but I don't know if there's any more need to dwell on it either, unless you have questions. Steve's done a very thorough job of analyzing the needs of the utility, and that's why we have what you have before you. If not, sewer utilities on page 259. Now, Trina, you and Steve were talking earlier. There is a slight adjustment we need to make on some contractual services, and we can do that, Steve. But for now, we have these numbers, and they're relatively close. In the scheme of a $12 million budget, we're in the ballpark. Steve, why don't you talk about some of the projects you got over at the treatment plant?
Well, actually, what we're working on right now, or we're hoping to finish up our construction upgrades to our treatment plant controls, which were originally put in 1996, and that is all the supervisory control, computer systems, monitors and things for the entire plant. Influent pumps, we're replacing 2 influent pumps with more lower volume pumps and motors, which we can use most of the time, and then replacing motors on the rest of the pumps so that we can be a lot more efficient in our electrical use with those. We're also, as part of that project, replacing our aeration system, 2 aeration system blowers with these high-speed turbo blowers. Again, much more energy efficient, and we're reconfiguring all the controls to the aeration system so we can operate that system more efficiently. Really a lot of what we're doing, I think some of the critical stuff we're looking at for next year, the usual CMOM CCAP work in the sanitary sewer system, continuing with that. Again, a 4% electrical estimate. We think we're going to have a minimal increase on our chemical uses. And I think, again, we're pretty much looking at just normal inflationary increases on the rest of the system. We have some funds included for assessment of large diameter sewers, which we have not done a detailed assessment of the larger sewers of 12. And these are probably going to be the bigger.
15 to 18, I think, is where
15 to 18 is some of it, but then we have interceptors as big as 72 inches in diameter. And so we need to get in and look at some of those things and evaluate condition. We also have a number of river crossings, so we have some funds involved with that.
As I mentioned earlier, we were talking about using Streets Division for closed circuit televising of our sanitary sewer and our storm sewer systems. The equipment that we have at the Streets Division is really not capable of televising those very large diameter pipes. Really about 24 inches in diameters. They do some bigger stuff, but it is a little bit harder to see. The thing with the sanitary sewer interceptors, those large diameter pipes, there's also a lot of flow in them as well, and that causes a lot more challenges for Streets Division to be able to do that work. That's where Steve is talking about we're going to need to bring in an outside contractor to be able to assist us with doing those assessments because we don't have the equipment and capabilities to do it with in-house staff, and there's not a sufficient amount or sufficient length of those mains to warrant us investing in that equipment to be able to do it with staff. It's just not something we would use on a regular enough basis.
We also have the Snow Road project that we've been working on for the Snow Road West lift station replacement. plus the interceptor work, again, working in conjunction with Public Works Engineering. And again, I mentioned asset management. You know, again, you look at the front sheet and net assets, you know, ending this year, we're just shy of $60 million, and that's net assets. Replacement cost of those assets would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're talking about significant equipment investment and structures. Our asset management plan does a couple of things. We evaluate the assets for current condition, but also we score them for criticality, so that we can make a better informed decision on replacement of those assets. So if we have a certain piece of equipment that are not there's something that we can actually run without or do without, or it's easy to take offline for a period of time, you know, those are going to score lower. If we have pieces of critical equipment, even though we have backups for all those pieces, running on one without having the other as a backup creates a potential regulatory violation issue or other concerns. Those assets will score higher. And we go through a pretty detailed process of listing, scoring these assets. And from that, we're able to develop a priority system and priority scores for these assets. And that's a tremendous value to us when we start looking at CIP and replacement of assets over time. And we actually have been doing that on the water side, and we've been doing it for about the last 5 years. And I think we've done at least 60 or maybe 70% of those critical assets that we identified that we needed to work on, we've worked on. One of them was replacement of the chemical feed systems over the last couple of years that we've completed. So again, those asset scoring and identification efforts are very helpful in the overall planning process. And again, this is a piece of the whole comprehensive plan puzzle. So we have that included in our consulting services fees in the plant portion. I really don't think we have much else that as far as general budget and operating budget items goes that aren't pretty much what we'd expect to see in putting together this budget for the next year.
So what is in this budget would be a rate increase for the sewer department. It's proposed at 10%. That would be for implementation on January 1 of 2016.
That doesn't have to go through the commission or whatever?
That would not go through the Public Service Commission. However, we will do a rate case on it, and we will present that to the council, because the council will need to provide action and approve that rate increase.
Okay. And that still falls under that requirement of 1.10 for revenue debt and all that, right?
Yep, there would be the required debt service coverage. Because we're issuing revenue debt, we do have a required debt service coverage in our bond covenants, and that is very critical that we maintain that.
Okay.
And just a final note is we'll continue our efforts in trying to weave our way through the phosphorus regulatory issues phase. We have a number of, yeah, it should be, but we still have a number of options, a number of things we're looking at, about 3 different things that we're working on simultaneously to see what's going to work out best. We're still probably at least a year out to being able to know with any certainty what some of these things, how these may play into it. But again, we're working on them and trying to get information as things develop. And I see that the Department of Administration finally, I think the variance, phosphorus variance that was passed through the legislature that needs to go through Department of Administration. They finished with their portion of it and responses to EPA, and so I believe that document will be going forward to EPA fairly shortly for their final review, and we'll wait and see how they respond. I think that variance has some very positive, provides us with some real good opportunities to take a longer range look at what's happening with phosphorus and give us some options to minimize costs over a significant period of time. So again, it's kind of a stay tuned thing, but if there's one thing that I spend a ton of time on that people don't hear a lot about, it's the phosphorus issues.
Yeah, I think staying on top of those moving targets, if you will, and what some of that means is it's a significant time impact on staff, and Steve does an amazing job with his professional organizations, staying on top of what what is being heard from the state level, and I think it's difficult sometimes to understand just how much time it takes out of Steve's day to just try and stay on top of where those things are headed and what what the outlooks could be.
With that said, I draw your attention to page 266. There's a similar, a mirror image in the water utility, but the second position on the personnel schedule is an environmental compliance manager. It's that important, and Steve is spending so much time. That position existed in this year's budget. We frankly haven't found the right person yet. It's a very difficult position to fill, but we want that position to get filled so that'll allow Steve to have somebody else work on the nuts and bolts of compliance, because there are so many mandates, and he shuffled his staff around to have that position. I'm not sure what else you guys want to say about it.
Is that going to be, it shows as a 50% time, would that be
50% is in water.
Oh, the other,
Yeah.
okay.
So their
Just gonna say it's a
regulation-
full-time position, but it's going to be a share.
That's essentially what I do. I mean, I'm 50-50 between the two utilities. Right now, we're not under regulatory crunches, things at water, so I'm spending a majority of my time with wastewater issues. Now, as we get into Marion Road Tower and some of the future Clearwell projects, that's going to flip a little bit. But the whole regulatory piece is huge, and both utilities have more and more new regulatory mandates. And in order to stay on top of that and make sure that we get positions properly for it, that would be one of the many responsibilities that position would have.
Okay.
So that's the sewer utility. At this point, I really would think there may be value into going into the CIP for water, wastewater. If we have time before 4:30, before we're done, maybe we could do stormwater utility, but then I think Steve we actually can take care of the utilities for the most part this way. The water utility starts on page 2016-19. These are the projects that are proposed. Some directly involve Steve and some don't.
Not only there, but if you get into the public infrastructure improvements utility section, which starts on page 40, so we'll kind of have to bounce between the two areas.
What page 4 or
40.
40?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
You actually have to start at the beginning. Street,
I'm not worried about the street projects. I think that's what the next meeting's for, because Steve, in terms of running the plants, doesn't have a whole lot of interaction with those. I just want to focus on the ones that are related to the treatment plant. If we could do that, to me, that would make the most sense. These are mostly water distribution. James, the ones on 19 and 20, do we need to talk about those with Steve?
19 and 20, I don't know that it's entirely necessary. It's, it's distribution, improvements, pipe in the ground type of things. We can if we want to, but I think...
Probably flipping to page 40 then makes the most sense.
I mean, we team up on development of these during the CIP discussion, so, I mean, our consultants are doing models on Irrigation Water Park Loop. We're having joint meetings, so, again, I kind of count on them to take the lead, but I'm fully involved with these projects. I will say we've added lead service replacements, I believe in 16 as an item. There's some potentially regulatory changes in the lead and copper water quality rules and how things are implemented. The more of these that we're able to do with any other projects, related projects, I mean, if we're digging and there's a lead surface and we replace it, we should do it. Because we may run into, in a couple of years, we may run into a mandate where we're going to be required to do that. And the more that we have done, the less we're going to get settled with in a potential
Spread the overall cost over more years.
Rule change requirement situation. So we're
This
trying to get ahead of the game a little.
This is another one to stay ahead of the curve so that it's not a big spike in one.
Exactly.
Yeah, so like Steve said, these projects on 19 and 20 are, those are heavily involved with the engineering division, providing design and construction support. Once we get into the projects on page 40, that's where we're getting more into the things that are taking place at the plant itself, and a lot more involvement from Steve and less involvement from engineering division.
I'd suggest we go through these because they really relate to what's going on at the plants.
Do media filter number 1 concrete repairs. You may recall that we have been working on a part of our process called the sedimentation basins. Again, these are large concrete structures that were built in between 1997 and 1999 with the new treatment plant. We're approaching, we're getting out there 15, 16 years with these, and again, these things are filled with water 24/7. It's concrete. It starts wearing and things start happening with it. So in order to make sure that we extend the life of these basins as much as possible, we're getting in, we're checking control joints and making sure that expansion joints and all those types of things are in good shape, replacing where necessary. So we've done the sedimentation basins, which are the first set of basins in the treatment process. The next set of basins are the dual media filters, and these are part of the real workhorses. Now, we can only have so many of these down at a time, and these things are full of filter media. They have under drains. So we're not really sure what we're going to run into. So we thought it would be best that we take one basin down and
See
what we have, not get ourselves in a bind with a whole bunch of stuff down or a whole bunch of work to do. And do these kind of in sequence so that we can do a good job of planning, getting them down, getting them fixed, getting them back in service. So we're kind of spreading these projects out over a number of years. So this is an estimate for the basin number 1, and then we will get into doing the other basins in future CIP years.
And how many basins do you have?
We have 4.
4.
Just keep going. Yeah, just keep going, Steve.
Yeah, okay. Filtration plant and water tower security upgrades. Boy, I'm trying to think when we did our first security project. Sometime after 2011, we did a fairly simplified security project, put some contact closures on doors and some cameras, and that system's getting, technology's been improved a lot. We've identified some other areas that we want to add a little additional camera work on things like that. So the backbone is still in place. We just really need to upgrade the equipment and make a couple additions to it. So this will be some of the cameras and things at the filtration plant. We're also looking at maybe doing some enhancements at the water towers, so we have a little better handle on what's going on out there. This new vehicle storage building has been in the CIP. We have not been able to pull the trigger on the project. We've got a final design and a construction estimate, and I asked for an increase in funds based on the actual construction estimate. So that's the difference between the 183 that was previously borrowed versus the 220 what we have. We're hoping to get that built. We have no place to store our trucks, the lawn equipment and things in the new plant. When the old plant was still there and not in service, we had a place to store stuff. When we built the CT basins, the old plant came down, and we're really, leaving trucks outside all winter long, plus not being able to store, snow blowers and things, not supposed to be able to store snow blowers and things like that in the building because of fire codes. We really need to get the structure up there so that we can protect and maintain that equipment. So, mixing system for Southwest Tower. Southwest Tower was slated for painting last year. The bids came in high, and it was primarily because of the timing of the bids. So we're in the process of getting ready to bid that project for next year. What we're finding in our the water quality in the towers and distribution system can be affected by water age. And our ability to maintain disinfection and keep the water quality up can be greatly enhanced by just being able to mix the towers, because we have so much water in there stored for a period of time. By mixing it, it just provides better disinfection. It maintains the water quality better. So I added that $40,000 is to add mixing to that water tower painting project.
And that's just the tower out on County Trunk N, which is in the high pressure zone, which has the lowest usage demands over the rest of the system.
Yeah, that's on the high pressure zone. That is problematic because there's not that much usage on it, and there's only one water main that connects to that tower, and it's a very long one. So sometimes we have to short cycle that tower. In other words, drop it way down and then try and fill it way up and bounce the levels around just to try and create our own mixing. Last week we had 3 different vendors in that provide mixing systems for water towers to do presentations to water plant staff, the guys that are going to be operating and maintaining these systems. So we're kind of going through a selection process with that, and this money would be added, and this would be added into the Southwest Tower painting bids. It'd be bid as part of that project, and again, it's just going to increase the cost a little bit.
And I think, as Steve mentioned earlier, the ability to provide, water flow at a pressure for firefighting is critical. That Southwest Tower primarily serves an industrial area, which typically has higher fire flow demands. And, the way they're managing the water in that tower now, if a fire were to break out while they've got that tower drawn down to try to get this mixing taking place, you could see, some challenges in trying to be able to battle that fire. So this is, again, a small project, I think, that really can add a lot of reliability to our system.
And our plan is, we'll be including this once we decide on a system. We'll be including that and the future painting projects and rehabs with all the other water towers. So this is just the first one. It's a kind of a timing thing, but that will be rolled into the other tower painting projects so that we will be able to get mixing in all the towers. So that pretty much covers the
water filtration.
The water things.
I'd just keep rolling because you got them right down the list. You got wastewater projects.
We have reconditioned 2 primary clarifiers. That has been in the CAP probably for 2 years, and we've not been able to get to that particular project. I believe those primary clarifiers were installed in the 70s.
73, if this is right.
Yep. Okay, there it is. And we have 4 primary clarifiers, and we have 4 final clarifiers. We've gotten all 4 of the final clarifiers are rebuilt. 2 of the 4 primary clarifiers are done. These would be the last 2 of all of our clarifiers to get completed. And by doing these projects, again, it's the mechanics, it's all the metal and inner workings, bearings, motors, and things like that drive these clarifier mechanisms and things like that. So Again, because it's aged a little bit, I requested a little additional funding to make sure we had enough to cover that. Washburn lift station electrical service upgrade. That electrical service was installed in 1992, and I'm certainly not an electrician, but as it's been described to me, it's a unique voltage setup that is not commonly used anymore. And so this equipment's kind of surpassed its useful life. What we want to do is include new pumps and panel, and then redo the wiring so that we're a more common voltage setup for that station.
Station up by Bergstrom?
Yes. So, again, we've got 20-plus years on the station, and I think this would be a good upgrade to it. And again, we're extending the useful life of that. I'll just flip to, if you want to flip to page 42, major equipment. There's two projects. Actually, there's 3 projects in there. The substation number 1 switchgear upgrade for $700,000. That is our primary motor control center for our influent pumping. So we're redoing all the pumping. We're putting variable frequency drives in there. Again, we're trying not to pile all the stuff into one project because we can get some pretty big projects that where we're trying to stretch this out. So this would kind of be a continuation of that work, and again, that would take care of that switchgear in that motor room, and so that we would have all the electrical components in that motor room taken care of. That being said, we have 11 other motor control centers that were installed throughout the plant in the 70s. So again, this is all the electrical service that feeds all the motors, all the pumps. This is where the electric service comes in, and that power goes to those pieces of equipment. We have this is just a planning and design number of $500,000. So we want to know what we're really looking at to replace those other 11 motor control centers throughout the plant. We know we're going to have to do it at some point in time. They've been well maintained. My understanding is the last group that we had work on them said that parts are still available. So this is one of those things where we're looking at a significant dollar amount that we may be able to defer. We may be able to look at like seeing where this project fits in a 5-year period instead of next year or the year after. Again, the more information we can get on this stuff and then roll it in with the asset management plan, then we can figure out so that we can actually look at, okay, what else do we need to do? How many dollars do we need to spend? Are we going to be retiring enough debt so that we can just stay even at debt service? Are we going to have to increase it? Where do we go with this kind of thing? But it's hard for us to do without spending this money. And it'll actually be design ready or bid ready once this money is spent, so that it'll essentially be the design component will be done, and then we can decide when it would be appropriate to bid it.
Steve, with respect to that, obviously the age is cause for concern. Maintenance costs on these things, have they been?
It's not bad. It's not bad. There aren't a lot of things, and I mean, what we had happen with one is that, some of these have plastic or Bakelite components in them and stuff, and they just get brittle, and you rack it in and out for maintenance or something, and a piece of plastic breaks. Well, once it breaks, you got to send that out and get it rebuilt before you can put it back in. We're going to do, and I think we may have done it already, is we're going to spare one of these on site. In other words, we can get it rebuilt, spare, have it available. So if one of these things goes down, we pull it out, put the spare in, we're good to go, and then we get it rebuilt, and that's our new spare. We try and do that with stuff so that and one of the things that's happened, it used to be that we could get suppliers to work on stuff, and they had parts inventories. It's harder and harder to find people to work on them.
Just in time.
Nobody has parts on the shelf. So we could be looking at a month, 6 months, a year sometimes, from date of order to get some of this stuff in-house to replace it. So we're actually having to build inventory now in order to protect ourselves, where we didn't have to before because there is no inventory out there. So these are just some of the little things that we're doing to try and make sure that we're keeping a balance with these things. We're able to get the maintenance. It looks like parts are still available, but I still want to know what it's going to take to get that 73 stuff replaced when it's time, and so we're ready to go. And then a small, we have a heating boil in our digester area that needs to be replaced. It's not a large number, but
And that's being funded with cash out of the utility as
yeah,
opposed to
that's right.
borrowing. That concludes the water and wastewater utility operating and CIP.
Do we want to hit on any of the vehicles at all while we're here, Mark, for water and wastewater?
I can say we have the water distribution is our
Thanks, James.
yeah.
We've got a little time. Let's do it. I think we might be able to knock off stormwater, but I need some direction from council as well. So, yeah, why don't you guys hit those on page 43? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just, as I was flipping the page, I saw.
Yeah, I forgot it too.
1, 2, we got 3 for distribution.
3 for distribution. Yeah, again, the rule of thumb is 10-year, but no, we look at stuff, and distribution trucks get used pretty hard. They're out there with service, meter replacements, locates. I mean, the service trucks are out during construction because we do the inspection of all the water mains on all the city contracts for water work. So we've got a front-end loader in there, or backhoe front-end loader. Those things get used hard. I mean, those are the guys that are out there digging when it's 20 below, 70, 80, 90 leaks a year, depending on the year and things. And what was it, 142 with the year from
One of those was mine.
the Arctic year we had and stuff. Again, that's 2006. Again, pickup truck with a service body, again, 2005, but again, those things are out there and really get used.
Your inspector vehicle.
Yes, and then the service, we have full-size vans for the service crew, and one of those. So those are the 3
For distribution.
vehicles, moving stock for vehicles. We have a 2003 GMC replacement at water filtration, and that truck is really starting to cost us as far as brakes and lots of front end and continual service work and things like that. So it's definitely time. And then the streets division that works sanitary sewer maintenance crew have a 1998 vac truck, number 57, that they use for maintenance of sewers, and I would like to say it's probably pretty amazing that thing's still on the road given the year.
And this is what keeps us out of lawsuits.
Yes. So
Yeah, the vac truck, is, when we're trying to televise a main, if it needs to be cleaned, the vac truck is the machine that goes out to clean it, because it's got a clean water tank and a tank for sucking up stuff out of the manholes as well. So if there's deposition of, in the case of wastewater, waste in a main, they will run that through with a high pressure water jetter head to blast that material out, and then either get it flowing down the main, or when it gets to a manhole, then they're lowering the pipe down in there and they're vacuuming it up. So that's, the machine it's clear water for cleaning and vacuum for, sucking stuff out of the manholes.
those equipment we need?
Yes.
That's all there is.
And it's used
There
hard.
there are two vac trucks. One is primarily utilized on the stormwater side, and one is primarily used on the wastewater side. This is replacing a very old machine that is, primarily servicing wastewater at this point.
Is this the red one?
No, this is a yellow one, but it's very old.
Yeah, it's the one with, I think it's got two stainless tanks. I think they replaced the tanks on this one, as I recall.
I think
a
so.
couple years ago.
Yeah.
Is this the vac oil that Leach was making at one time years ago? Or has that one disappeared?
I have no idea who the vendors are. I don't think, does Leach still make them? I don't think they do.
They haven't for a long time, but they did maybe 15 years ago. They bought a company out of Milwaukee.
Yeah, and this says international on it, so that's probably the truck to the manufacturer of the vac system.
Yeah, I
There's a
don't
couple
know.
of them out there, I haven't, it's been a while since I've looked.
Actors.
This is proposed to be funded with cash, and we've been trying to do more of that for these types of things. And even though this one lasted us, 18 years by the time we retire it, it's still, there's some of this stuff just needs to be purchased with cash. We can't
And this
borrow
one's
for everything.
This one's probably past its useful life. I know
Well, that's-
when Streets Division gets a call for one of the vac trucks, they will use the other unit first, and this is kind of the backup unit, if you will, just because the other one is a much better unit. And works
other units.
works
That,
much
that,
better.
that would give you
Not even good
three,
enough for
then would you
sewer.
rotate one to the backup?
This one would be gone.
Yeah, okay, so then,
There's
Oh.
two.
counting that one, you got two.
Yes, there are two vac trucks total. I believe the other unit truck number 58 was just replaced.
2 years
Year or
ago.
two
Looks
ago,
pretty
yeah.
new. I
Yeah,
think.
no, I
Yeah.
Remember
know
that.
And I think that one was funded out of stormwater.
I should,
Okay.
should leave here.
All right.
Quarter of 5.
That's it for major equipment?
Yes, that is it for major equipment for water and wastewater.
James, how long do you think it will take to go over the stormwater utility?
Well, that would depend on how in-depth you would like to get into the multiple recommendations that we have for capital and for rates.
Sounds like a long discussion. Quite honestly, with the exception of community development not getting finished, we've made a lot of progress today. We do have a meeting scheduled for November 4th, and that was to discuss CIPs, but we've got a lot of CIPs out of the way. The only CIPs we don't have out of the way are comprehensive streets, stormwater, and water distribution, which we skipped over a little bit.
Right.
Those are the main ones. I think we can probably, because I think it will take a little more time, and being a quarter after, our scheduled time to be out of here was 4:30, and I want to respect that. The mayor said he has a drop-dead time of 4:45. I don't know if we could do justice to James' stuff.
No, I think we do not want to try to race through the topics that were brought up at the last Stormwater Utility Committee meeting. I think we want to have a good back and forth discussion on those, and I think trying to race through it in 15 to 30 minutes would not do it the appropriate justice that it
Not do the
needs.
2-hour discussion we had at the meeting justice.
We probably, I would like some feedback from council on how we are, where we're going, some ideas. Yeah, I've heard things being discussed, so I'd like, some feedback would be good.
Before we go there, we're not gonna need James and his guys, do we?
No, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Steve.
You guys.
Long day already.
Just a couple of things. Is this our fifth budget?
This is our fifth.
This is the best one so far. I mean, the timing is great. Even though it's a long day, it's much better than the evening. Everyone's
much
fresh.
better.
And if I may, Mayor, I would like to thank the council very much for these time slots during the day versus the late evenings.
Oh, yeah. There hasn't been one staff person that said, geez, I wish we could go back to the.
I like the safety net.
There hasn't, Herms just said there hasn't been one staff member that said, let's go back to nighttime.
Oh, and I don't think there's a
I thought you
council
said there hasn't
member.
been one staff member that fell asleep. And that's also true.
And I don't think there's any council members that really want to go back to that format either, so.
it's-
I mean, I appreciate those that are in the working world for taking your time off, and Ben for school, obviously. But I think this is a much better format for where we're going and what we're doing.
Well, and for the
Just a
importance of these
couple
decisions.
things.
This is the bulk of our responsibility to our citizens, and that if we're going to be diligent about the process, to take the time to do these discussions and to do these discussions justice is important, and we would not be good stewards of the taxpayers' money if we did not engage in the discussions that we have to have.
Right.
Well, just a couple things too. I think of all the previous sessions, this was the most of a working session. I think a learning session for those of us who've been here a while. I learned a lot of things today about why we're doing the things that we're doing. It was more of to me, it was more of a team environment, unlike the days where we're sitting up there and people are sitting down here. But I think a couple of things that came out of it, and if there's agreement here, I think the need for a municipal court has come through loud and clear. We've been talking about it since, I think, the trip some of us made to La Crosse 2-3 years ago, that we saw what they were doing and how it was reinforcing their things, just like the rental inspection program. So Christian Gossett, the DA, understands why we would like to do it, is behind it. So I think we have to put that on our to-do list for 2016.
I agree, Mayor, and I was going to recommend that as more of an internal study of maybe the Human Resource Department, find out what do we all need. Do we need a municipal judge, obviously? We need a municipal clerk. We will probably need a stenographer that takes the, documents that.
If we're going to do this right,
It's going to take a year.
We got to study it.
Right, we got to study it, find out if
we've
the
gotta start
pros, the
on
cons. Yep, but we have to
on the
move
agenda.
so that it can, my feelings are, it would be in a projection of a 2017 budget cycle, but using 16 to lay the groundwork, find out, obviously the
what we
county
need for-
probably won't be out of the safety building.
Exactly.
Can we use the council chambers or this room, or what would be appropriate, or can we rent a courtroom in the safety building if we feel for security reasons we need that? Those are all the questions, and then obviously, what type of policies, procedures, what would go through municipal court. I mean, there's plenty of municipal courts here in Winnebago County that we can obviously get that information from. Both Neenah, Menasha, Town of Menasha, Ameren, Winnebago County all have municipal courts. So I think we can get all the information kind of done in-house. I don't think we need to spend $30,000, $40,000 on an extensive study. I think it can be done with our staff, giving them the timeline of, 2016, but I think getting council information back to council in a timeline, I don't know if we want to put a timeline together, but I think.
I'd like staff, I think we're all in agreement, we have to move in this direction.
Yep.
What I'd
I'm a
propose,
firm believer in plagiarism. If a city has a good program,
You bet.
just cross out La Crosse and write in Oshkosh.
I'd propose to get an outline of what something would look like and begin with some other studies that have been done to take a
Yep.
look at that.
For implementation
and then take a
in the
look.
2017.
I just don't want to sell a bill of goods that is not complete. I
No,
just feel
I
that's a-
totally agree, but I think,
It's not just financial, it's also the other issues. And please don't take that as me having any disagreement with this. I think it's something, and it's coming to roost, you're hearing it from departments, but a lot of it is anecdotal, and a lot of it is piecemeal. We got to bring it all together now, and I'm absolutely willing to
That's
take a look at that.
Well, and I think, and to Herm's point, I'm glad that you brought it up, because I think it is a to-do, but I don't think it's anything that we should really talk about between now and when the budget's final, because that is a huge project. And I agree, I think it's something we should take a look at, but I think that's gonna require a lot of staff time, and it's gonna be very, very comprehensive in order to execute it correctly. So I think we just stick to the budgets, what we have in front of us at hand, and
But
then.
I don't
on
want to
that.
find us in October of 2017 talking about, should we look at it? I think.
Right. Well, I guess
I think for 2016,
First, we need to get
Let's
this
get-
out of the way first.
I mean, would it be better for you, Mark, if we use it as a council agenda item in December, that council discussion and direction of city manager moving forward? That way the budget's approved, we're only having one meeting in December, but then that way you can go back and have a directive from council to move forward with researching and then coming back to council with the research, the documentation, everything, that this makes sense for us to move forward with municipal court. Would that be the way you'd like to go with it?
Yeah, I was predicting that as the day was evolving, that the top of my goal list for 2016 was gelling very easily. So, yeah.
and that's where I was going to go, is that something that we
Be
can
a
give
goal.
a goal or a direction to the city manager where we include, this is your goal, is to do the research phase, get this organized. As we do the strategic plan upgrade, we look at the incorporation of using our strategic plan and our strategic visioning process to incorporate how does this affect our quality of life assets, and go through that review process through the strategic plan, look at the municipal court, tie it in with all of those, and then once we've done that, we can develop the policies, any new ordinances that need to be designed and written, and get that process rolling through 2016, so that when we're sitting here and looking for 2017, 2018, we have a very clear plan of attack of, in 2016 we did this, 2017 we need to do this. We may not have it on the books and functioning until 2018, but we find that out through his direction.
The other thing was personnel. It seemed that there's some agreement that we should look at possibly additional police officers.
We saw, and
And how do we, what feedback do you need from us as far as the different things that we would like to see added, changed?
Well, that, I think,
Sending a fire department.
let me work backwards
Okay.
to answer that question. Let me work backwards. The council adopts a budget on November 24th. So working backwards from that, the sooner we get that feedback, the better. The question you want to ask for yourselves is, you have a public hearing on November 10th, or 9th. Help me out, Trina, just get my calendar. The second Tuesday in November, the 10th.
And
Certainly you
birthday.
want to hear feedback from the public before you do anything final, pre-final. But clearly, you have ideas of things you want to do, and the sooner you give that to us, the better. I wouldn't want to put you in a position where it looked like you were ahead of the public on the issue, but certainly, if you see something that you really want to do, the sooner you tell us, the better. And Trina would be ecstatic about that. So Trina's like, give it to me today,
And then I can provide the levy impact for you, which you
Right.
might want to take that further and have further thought process before
Well-
you bring it forward.
Right, because you're probably, Mark, planning, as you have done, I think it's the last 2 or 3 years, if we do this, this will be what happens if you take some money out of here
Sheet.
and move it over here, this is what's going to happen. And then ultimately, the night we approve the budget, obviously, then we know the tax rate and the tax levy, so.
pass that around. That's the form. I thought I had given it to you yesterday, so I apologize. The idea is that this is what we start doing. What we've got is a bunch of blanks that we'll fill in through a spreadsheet that Trina has online. And as you guys give us ideas that you want to do, we can tell you levy impact, we can tell you rate impact, and we can just go on down the line. We'll show what the levy increase or decreases based on the individual decision, and then a running total. That's the whole idea, so that you understand the impact of the decisions that you're making. So this is what we'll use. And we already have a few things that in mind for example, I'd mentioned after open enrollment for employees ends next week, we'll have an exact number. We know that you're on and you're not, and we'll know that. If we have to make any adjustments, Trina's concerned the number will go up. Well, if the number goes up, you need to know that that's going to have a levy impact before we get into that. In terms of officers or whatever, most of the other Enhancements are really more of a policy decision for council. Financially speaking, they're minimal impacts, if any. The real issue is the ones that have levy impact. Police certainly has that one out there. You've had these discussions today. I think every year you're just more aware, more familiar with this stuff. You saw this chief staffing level, and when I saw it, I was like, you got to see Public Works as well. And I'm not suggesting that you jump out and change the staffing, because you have to look the voters in the eye. I don't. So I understand that. This was a relatively easier budget to put together, primarily because of health insurance. If it wasn't for health insurance, we would be sweating bullets right now. That's kind of a one-time thing, so all I caution you is
Don't add too much to the
don't add
structure.
too much too fast, because then if you have to backpedal. A little bit at a time always helps. The chief only asked for one. Now, the chief told you, I'd prefer 104. I'd like to get to 101 first. That's entirely up to you, but just recognize that those are impacts. Splashes have splash back. So I just caution you about that.
There's one thing that I wanted that I've been harping on for a while, and it's the marketing and communication side of things. And particularly, what really pushed me in that direction was some of the stuff that we're talking with the Parks Department, and the ability to promote revenue-generating events at city-owned facilities that would help offset some budgetary things down the road. Creating some sort of nominal amount of money to allow for more proactive marketing on some of those, particularly things that the Tuesday night concert series at the Leach and the events that go on at the zoo, and utilizing those resources that we've built up and developed and invested in, some sort of mechanism to allow for, even if it's just for staff time, to go to the radio station or something along those lines, do a call-in, something in the senior center, the resources at the senior center and all the things that they're focusing on in the programming. I don't know exactly what form that would take, but I think they're looking at some, even if it's a nominal dollar amount, to focus on giving them the resources to generate more revenue down the road.
We have to work with Emily more in OCMS, because one of her jobs is really social media in addition to programming on her.
Well, and everybody's working with her, but I think there's got to be a way that we can. I don't know what those assets are. I don't have, I know that we have Emily and I know we have her staff, but coordinating that with all of the revenue generating assets, the Leach, the zoo, things like that, finding a way to coordinate that more effectively and get the word out. And this would be something that we could also use when we're talking about utility rate increases and so on and so forth. How can we better communicate with our citizens? I don't know what form that takes, but finding money to allow those resources to be developed and coordinated and implemented so that the things like the convention center, and I don't know if that means working with the CVB more, but finding a way to, we heard it with the museum, coordinating between to that tourism side of things and investing a little money to make some more money, I think is something that we need to look at, demonstrate our commitment.
I don't think it's a case of it's not enough. It's just never. It's never done. Our work is never done on that. I think just you could have a great outreach effort. And Monday, I was pleased with the turnout for the listening session. I genuinely was pleased. There are 30, 40 people in the audience. Does that mean that that's the the recipe for success for another meeting? Not necessarily. You always have to evaluate and evaluate again. Well, how can we better outreach? I'm always open to different ideas on those types of things, because sometimes even great ideas get stale and then they don't work anymore. It's, we have to constantly look at that, and I know Emily is absolutely open to it. With that said, though, Councilor Clark, you said Emily and her staff. There's Emily. And the staff is, it really is a collaborative effort. Emily has to utilize, if it's a finance issue, she has to work with Trina and her staff. If it's police, she works with, now they have a dedicated person with Officer Nichols, but she works with Joe. You have to work, and it's constant, ongoing, something you do every single day to reevaluate and do better and do better. So it's always how we tell our story better.
With that said, shall we call it a day?
Yeah, I mean, you covered all the general fund, by the way. You covered everything general fund. You have some outlying funds, some, special utility fund, big stormwater utility, but you covered all the general fund in 2 days. Wow.
This is a great format. You guys did a ton of work. It's greatly appreciated. It's been, I think, very educational from the standpoint of helping us make a decision on the final budget.
For the meeting on the 4th, and it kind of gets back to Councilor Allison Osby's question, how do we get there here? I would think on the 4th, we can make pretty short order of the remaining things in Public Works, and then have a discussion. What types of things are you looking at? That I already have the green light on the. I know what my goal is going to be. One of my goals is going to be for next year, and we'll start working on how we approach that and get it done, knowing that that's going to be a goal.
There's a meeting on the 4th, 2 hours of 5 to.
It's at 5. You guys decide if you want to decide how you want to format that. Don't tie yourselves up completely and say done at 7. It'd be a great goal, but depends on where you want to take this. Can you get James and the remaining CIPs done in 2 hours? Absolutely. I feel very confident we can do that.
TIFs.
And the TIF, but you got to bring Alan back for the TIFs. That's the other thing, and we'll talk to Alan about being available on that date. Everybody had it on their calendars. Everybody, all department heads had it on their calendar. You just narrowed it down to just a handful of staff. So you're in good shape there.
Okay.
Keep the close sort of open-ended right now.
But at the end, direction to staff would be much appreciated.
Scheduled for 5 to 7, if we go to 8, big deal.
Okay. So the mayor has bribing us with pizza that day. Is that 4:30, or do you want us at pizza? Okay, pizza at 4:30. All right, we'll stay in here. So you can bring your slices in. Oh, you can bring your. I guess that's up to you.
We can start over there.
Very good. Thank you for giving so much of your time.
This has been great. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.